Republican free-for-all. What will happen to the GOP if Trump just disappears? I think the real show would be around midterms. Trump keeps a lot of the GOP in line by threatening to endorse rivals to replace people who won't pull for his agenda. He has enough of a cult of personality with the Republican voters that he can just say someone needs to be replaced and they'll vote accordingly. So being loyal to him makes their seats safer. There's a lot of doubt that Vance could remotely rally the same kind of fiat with voters, and scared politicians will start infighting like rats on a sinking ship to form power blocks in Trump's absence. Meanwhile, hardcore MAGAs in the House will likely start finding themselves on the receiving end of backstabs by establishment conservatives who never liked having to tolerate the crowd since the Tea Party days. There'd likely be a lot of establishment versus outsider infighting, like what you see with the DNC undermining Mamdani in New York City. I view it as more of a negative thing. It's not that Vance can rally or not, it's just that all of these Republicans are scared to have Trump trash talk them because his base takes it as a literal command. I don't think Vance's rhetoric has any legs. When he craps on someone, it's forgotten immediately and goes nowhere. Historically, when a leader with a strong grip on their followers passes, if the leader themselves hasn't decided and declared succession, there's a schism that forms as different acolytes vie for his followers, and they all claim to be the one true heir. In this case, you have a clear frontrunner in Vance, thanks to constitutional instruction. The challenge here is that the passing of Trump would open up grift opportunities, and Vance is a damp sock that made a wish to be a real little boy, and he has the personality that's as charming as stepping in dog throw-up with your bare feet. Don Jr. comes across as believing he's a power player on his own merit, but he seems a likely contender for some followers simply by his name. Elon, as the biggest whiner in the room with the loudest microphone, will snap up some votes, and I honestly expect a dark horse from outside our usual suspects will cause the greatest schism. Trump's celebrity allowed him to tap into non-voters, and that specific group are the crown jewel of Trump's political power. There is a chance they'd go dormant, but I think someone else with ambition will lie well enough to Pied Piper them and get them in the fold. I'll be honest here, folks. I'm going to voice some of these theories that people have, but I have so little belief that anything about the situation is predictable. Within the US, I've been repeatedly surprised by the capacity to vote for Trump, and the fact that so much resistance can be raised against him after he gets elected, and by the fickleness of others who alternately talk about him as if he were Satan himself and then vote for him anyway. So let's see if anyone can come up with a scenario that actually convinces me. Peter Thiel has invested a lot of money to get Vance into the position he's in now. People should start taking that crap seriously. He's not a run-of-the-mill political donor looking for favors. He's creating the apparatus to operate a surveillance state with everybody's data and everybody's dirt. I'd assume that Vance takes over as his glove puppet and there are some seriously dark moves afterwards. This is exactly what I've been scared of. If Trump dies, the fight isn't even close to over. Vance is likely to be even more dangerous than Trump. I think him taking over was likely the plan all along. If Trump dies, people on the left will be relieved and relax even slightly, and that's all Thiel and Vance need to destroy the country. In other words, we cannot be complacent even for a second with Trump's eventual death. I don't think anybody would believe it. Even if true, they'd probably end up worshipping the ghost of Trump. My hope is that his base believes he faked his death and is somehow still running the country, and they all put him down as a write-in for the 2028 election, splitting the Republican vote. I don't think we see a power struggle. I think J.D. Vance takes over and points at the celebrating on the left. The GOP machine would keep Trump's base worked up over the lack of humanity that the liberals have. They hold memorials and tributes for a year straight into the midterms. They really dial up the whole, "the left will take your weapons and destroy your way of life" rhetoric, ensuring the midterms go their way. Then it's a 2-year cooldown from Trump while trying to convince the base that JD is the new Trump. I'm with you as far as that goes, but I don't see Vance holding the party together for any longer. It's a fractious bunch, and he is not a super charismatic guy. I also wouldn't be surprised if the grieving MAGA base accuses him of ending Trump and latching onto this idea. Oh, we're getting our hopes up with this question, guys. Evil has a way of hanging on. Somehow, Palpatine returned. I was just telling someone how there'll be celebrations if and when Trump dies, similar to the end of the Return of the Jedi Extended Edition after Palpatine dies. In that version, you see celebrations of Palpatine's death on Tatooine, Naboo, and Coruscant. You'd be surprised. I think a large percentage of MAGA wouldn't actually accept his death and believe that he's doing a 4D chess move so he can return for the 2036 election due to some fake loophole they read on Facebook. I think a lot of infighting happens. Trump is the glue that holds that bullcrap together. You should watch The Death of Stalin. The power struggle will almost look exactly like that. One of the funniest movies of the last 10 years and pretty accurate to the events. J.D. Vance will be a weak leader, and the GOP will break into factions and infighting. The infighting would be the threat of not having a president who can threaten to primary people. A second Russia-type investigation would need to happen, and I don't know how that would shake out. The one in Canada figuring out which politicians are susceptible to outside influence has been tough. Parties don't want to admit fault and have issues with certain members. The RCMP wants to be able to monitor these people. The citizens want immediate action. It's a very fine line. There's nobody in the ranks of grandstanding, old creepy weirdos who could hold the cult together. Vance has all of the charisma of a swampy butt, and people, even in deep red areas of the country, are teed off at them. That's why they're skipping town halls, and the few that have tried have been practically run out of town. The corrupt imbeciles in the party are willing to ride or die with the tea guy. I find it highly unlikely they'll do the same with Vance. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump dies, Vance just resigns, and they make Mike Johnson president. That sniveling little weasel has more pull than the Davenport diddler, and he's a religious zealot who thinks God talks to him. Just the kind of crazy the Heritage Foundation wants for implementing their version of theocratic fascism. Let me give you a counterpoint to this. In Austria in the 1980s, the charismatic Jörg Haider took over the Freedom Party, the FPR, which was nominally liberal in the European sense, but had always been the home of the old Third Reich remnants as well. He purged the party of its liberal elements, changed its course to one of opposing immigration, fully exploiting xenophobic and racist sentiments, and downplaying the crimes of the Third Reich. Essentially, he wrote the playbook for modern right-wing populism. Jörg Haider was a very charismatic individual and ran circles around his political opponents of the socialist and conservative parties in debates by breaking a lot of the established political rules. I'll spare you the details of his 30 years of Austrian politics, but he managed to get his party into a government coalition, broke said coalition, started a new party, entered another coalition, and eventually crashed his car into a tree while drunk driving and died. The leader of the FPR then quickly absorbed the remains of Haider's new party, and even though he lacked the charisma of Jörg Haider, he again managed to bring his party into a coalition government with the Conservatives, that ended when a video surfaced of him doing white snow and drinking vodka Red Bull with somebody who he thought was the daughter of a Russian oligarch, and basically promising to sell the republic to her father. The coalition ended, the party loses big in the next election, and its next leader is a hate-filled little man who's completely devoid of any charisma, and now, only 7 years later, the FPR is poised to become the strongest party in the next election. The moral of this story? The idea that you need a charismatic leader to get people to vote against their interests and for hurting the right people is a comforting lie we tell ourselves. Imagine a room full of monkeys throwing their feces at each other. That's what it will look like. I don't think anyone's mentioned the very serious and gravest threat of them all in this scenario: zombie Trump. If the Dems want to gain any control of this narrative, they should be fighting fire with fire. They should be shouting that Vance is trying to kill Trump to take his spot from the rooftops. Then, when he inevitably kicks the bucket, they can continue to claim he had Trump killed to sow as much division amongst MAGA as possible to weaken his grip on power. Vance won't inherit his cult of personality. The Dems? Do something? Now who's talking crazy? Stephen Miller and Project 2025 architects Vought, Antoni, and also the Heritage Foundation will ascend. ICE and immigrant removal will continue. More election rigging and more closed doors. It'll be interesting to see how many of them disavow Trumpism. Absolutely. When all the crap that they were on board with that goes directly against what they claim to believe in starts to come more to light in the public, they'll all claim they were never in support. They rewrite history every day and their supporters just eat it up. I have no doubt that some of them will immediately start trying to paint a picture of themselves as resisting Trump every step of the way. The same way that individuals like Lindsey Graham, Cruz, and Vance have footage of themselves condemning Trump in the strongest possible terms, but now pose themselves as lifetime supporters. Nothing. It would be a feeding frenzy, because just like with Mr. H of Third Reich fame, the person at the top is who the cultists put their faith in. The second and third in command are parasites leeching off the main guy. The faction will splinter and they will fail. They will anyway, but it would happen faster. They will tear each other into pieces. Jesus Christ, this will be fun. Da 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 da, etc. So John Adams is finally getting a second term. It would be like the death of Stalin, a ton of feckless politicos pretending to be devastated by a loss while they try to position themselves behind the scenes. Probably a lot less violence. I know, let's frickin' find out. We just need to push the rumor that Vance had him killed and sit back with popcorn. Have you ever seen a bunch of monkeys fighting over something? One of them grabs it and runs off, only to have another grab it and run in the opposite direction, over and over until they're all screaming and throwing their own number 2. And in the end, nothing gets accomplished, and whatever they're trying to get their hands on is completely destroyed, and everything is generally worse. So, like that, but not as intelligent. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? They would not have a puppet to take the blame. The GOP is the disease, Trump is but a symptom. They allow him to be a buffoon and rally the troops who are as evil and racist as he is, now openly, however. Trump is too stupid to think of these atrocities himself, it's all the GOP. Someone will have to step in to be the new Führer, and it won't be Vance. I think the title should say, when he dies. Time is undefeated. The GOP will probably behave like how his children are going to react when everyone's in court hogging up court time and fighting over his money that it turns out that he doesn't really have because he's in so much debt. You see, the thing is, every one of the butt-licking toadies who surround Trump fancies himself to be the one true and obvious successor. They see what they're doing now as paying their dues to earn the position when the time comes. I don't see Rubio, Johnson, Vance, Cruz, Abbott, or even the now disgraced supporters like Graham and DeSantis stepping aside to support somebody else in that role. There are women who belong on that list too, but let's face it, nobody who doesn't have a Johnson has a snowball's chance in heck of leading today's GOP. Even non-politicians like Don Jr. and Stephen Miller will throw their hats in the ring. Nobody will crack 15% support until the convention, at which point the party will finally settle on someone utterly unappealing to anyone but their own tiny faction. Some of the failed ones will sign on to the ticket's coattails, and 1 or 2 others will split the MAGA vote with write-on or third-party candidacies. The Republican tendency to hold their nose and vote against anyone with a D after their name means that the splintered party can't be automatically written off, but unless the Dems nominate a blatantly unappealing corporate shill, again, odds are pretty good of a blue victory. One thing I haven't heard anyone speculate about is his estate. This year he's finally become as rich as he's always bragged about, but he's a malignant narcissist. Is he even capable of recognizing his own demise and choosing a worthy successor? Keep in mind, he doesn't respect or love Ivanka, she's merely his most prized possession. But he's got Trump coin money, the DGT stock, hundreds of millions in bonds that he's trying to revalue by restructuring the Fed. The super PAC money probably isn't technically his, but that doesn't seem to have stopped them from spending it however they please, plus God knows how much in kickbacks. So the kids and Vance will fight over the money. Hopefully that will keep those funds from being spent on oppressing us. All I know is it's going to be real ugly, that's for sure. J.D. Vance takes over and gets eaten alive by the MAGA and also everyone opposed to Trump because he's not Trump. J.D. Vance is messed up, but not Trump-level messed up. He won't be able to take the heat. He's a weak leader, which is why Trump picked him in the first place. This is why the GOP worked so hard to corrupt the process to enable themselves to steal elections, because they know they're not popular enough to win by actual merit. I think Miller is ruthless enough to do whatever's needed to take power, but there won't be anyone else on the right who'll command the support that Trump has. They'll have a whole conspiracy about the left killing him because an 80-year-old out-of-shape man dying is super suspicious. It's a cult of personality, and that always suffers when the personality dies. Trump has a very specific skill set. He can read a room and see what's resonating, and he has absolutely zero convictions about anything other than his own personal advancement. So he could pivot all of his positions on a dime if that's what he thinks lands best at the moment. He can take both sides of an issue in the same speech and happily articulate both of them as the only correct position. Rubio knows too much about how things actually work to pander that hard. DeSantis has too much pride to flop on his own ideas and chase the crowd the way Trump does. Vance has the absence of a moral compass to adopt whatever he needs to, but his negative charisma will keep him from holding on to MAGA. I don't think they'd admit he's dead. They'd weekend at Bernie's him for as long as they possibly can. Also, they'd attempt to utilize the MAGA idiots to continue to threaten and chase away people who disagree with them. Do not discount the members of his staff. They've learned from multiple years of watching Trump use threats and intimidation and blackmail to get what he wants, and they're probably very familiar with the techniques. Don Jr. isn't just going to fade into the background quietly. My guess is that he does anything he can to undermine Vance, working along with Voldemort, Stephen Miller. I'd say Stephen Miller tries to use Vance as his pawn, but Vance is already subservient to Peter Thiel and can't have two masters, so he instead discharges Miller. Miller gets mega angry, does everything he can to undermine Vance and his allies. All of the other MAGAs do a Game of Thrones-style grasp for power and take each other down one by one. The Republican Party will need a major reformation. MAGA dies with Trump, but with that being said, more sinister forces will attempt to finish what he started, but they'll struggle because they're all incompetent morons. When? Not if, when. If T-Rump died, then the crap show would go crazy because nobody has a drop of respect for J.D. Vance. Trump is the only thing holding them together at this point. He's their party. It's because of his cult, and without him there is no cult. They put all of their chips on this geriatric, unhealthy dough ball, and when he dies, the whole thing topples. We can only hope that he doesn't get his full agenda finished before his heart gives out. I think it'll be pretty similar in terms of backstabbing and panicked attempts at positioning oneself for a power grab. I don't know what it will look like, but Yakety Sax or the Benny Hill theme will be playing in the background. I mean, we can only hope, right? Regardless of what you think about the guy in charge right now, you have to admit that some of his cronies are absolutely cartoonish buffoons, and watching them have a literal slap fight in the aftermath is not only possible, but could be endlessly funny. I believe Vance will struggle to hold MAGA together. His beta personality will make him a target. Trump's bully demeanor and weird charismatic personality has made him a hero of the uneducated underclass. Vance is one of them, except he's a slick-talking nerd politician. They don't want to be led by him, they want to be led by someone who has the ability to say what they want to say without clever nuance. This is my belief. I'm not always right, but I often am. I think it would be the biggest crap show your country has ever seen. As I understand it, JD would be next in line, and that's kind of like frying pan into the fire. Next would be M. Johnson, and I'm not sure who wants to be a dictator more, him or Donnie. The rest on the list are all inexperienced, incompetent, ignorant, racist sycophants. If I were an American at this point, I would be scared. Very scared. Good luck and toodle pip to you all. I see two scenarios. Scenario A, JD Couchlover becomes president, but regardless, the foundation of the cult is gone, and the entire GOP, this ex-political party, now cult of the insane, it's just imploding and done for good. The current GOP is nothing without Trump and can't survive. And scenario B, it doesn't actually matter whether Couchlover has charisma or not or who the next president would be, because the GOP doesn't plan to ever have legit elections any longer. They don't need the MAGA base. They'll just stay in power with the occasional fake election thrown in, like in Russia. There is no Republican Party or GOP. It's now an oligarch, Christian nationalist mafia-type crime syndicate. The dark powers behind it will come together and figure out a new figurehead. Just like what they did with Reagan from Nixon, and they'll make the path forward. In the light, the ants who think they're in control will all fight for power, cheat to hold ground, and look for distractions. It's already starting. My immediate concern is less about the overall power struggle and more about who immediately gets Vance's strings. Since if it happens before the next inauguration day, that means Vance the puppet becomes president. He's a weak-willed man to be sure, and he doesn't have the charisma to capture the base, but he follows orders of whoever he deems to be powerful enough to propel him further, and his track record for puppeteers is terrifying. He doesn't need the cult if he just immediately does everything Trump hasn't done yet, due to Trump being tempered a bit by his desires for wealth and adoration. Vance might not have those same hang-ups. Trump is a symptom of a greater illness. He's old and frail, and they already have a plan for succession. There'll be no power struggle, J.D. Vance will take over, and the Trump kids will endorse him to appease the cult. Vance takes over, a few months of arguing, and then they fall in line like good little soldiers and get around to finishing Project 2025, just like his master Peter Thiel commands. I just came here to read about it. If you want my opinion, I think it will all collapse. I don't think there'll be a struggle. I think Donald Trump is literally a puppet on the stage, at least in his second term. I don't think he was so much his first term, maybe a little. He's providing a smokescreen for everyone else backstage to get into place. If there's to be a power struggle, it's already happened. Look at Liz Cheney as an example. Liz Cheney? Hopefully it would absolutely implode and we'd never have to deal with a single GOP politician again. In a magical, perfect world, when he dies, every single conservative GOP person would go with him, and the world could finally begin to heal. But Thanos isn't real and neither is magic, so we'll be stuck with all of these hateful people. It would be a hilarious mess, but Trump will never die. He's probably having his organs replaced by organs stolen from children right now. JD Vance doesn't have that charisma like DT has for the MAGA movement. I hope it starts to become the fall of MAGA if Trump goes out. The theocracy policy aspect of the GOP will build tenfold, citing the need for God in government. That'll become the focus of the party. There will be a serious fracture at the top. I can't see his kids not trying to grab power. JD doesn't have the cult of personality that Trump does, so he won't be able to rally the support of MAGA as easily. A free-for-all between the tech bros and the so-called Christians. JD Vance will probably end up making Stephen Miller VP and then resigning. Then Miller will make him VP again. This is the only way for Vance to get to keep on vacationing. Congress will go along because that's what they do. They're just in it for the benefits. There's definitely going to be some crazy conspiracy theories. Some saying he isn't actually dead, he just has to fight preverts and predators underground, while others will say the Dems killed him. I heard Biden coated his desk with death toxin when he left office. That has a delay timer to not kill him until 8 months later.
Children of single parents, who was the worst person your parent has dated? My dad started dating a woman who firmly believed that I was part of his old life and that he needed to cut ties with me. I was 14 and became terrified my mom would find someone who would do the same, and I'd end up with no family. My dad's ex-fiancée, she was almost our evil stepmother until one day she decided to call me a fat, lazy female dog, and my dad realized how awful she was to my sister and I. That was the day I learned how much he actually cared for us as well. He dumped her butt and kicked her out of the house. Her awful daughter left too, and it was finally peaceful at my dad's again. He dated her on and off for years afterwards until she went back with her ex-husband. My dad has sworn her off for good now, which I'm glad for since she was a toxic person. I wish he could find someone worth his time though. I know he gets lonely. We'll call him Jose. Younger than my mom, chronically unemployed, a drinker, violent, and literally illiterate. But good-looking, so my mom was smitten. My mom was from a good, in-name family. She had education, she had 2 little daughters, and she brought this scumbag to our peaceful little apartment, and he settled in right away, beating the crap out of all of us, impregnating my mom 4 times, running off for months, and never paying child support. When he was around, he would beat on us mercilessly, and my mom just stood by like a frickin' div, not intervening. When my younger brother was hooping for attention, Jose, a grown man, would hit him. Finally, my mom got diagnosed with lupus and Jose found out and literally abandoned her at the pharmacy. Years later, we find out that he had been sexually abusing my older sister. I am still so mad at my mom for the decades of bullcrap we endured with that man. He was literally a cancer and she couldn't summon the self-esteem to leave him, even when he was beating us with extension cords. There's a poem by Nayyirah Waheed called Before You Get That Key Made that should be handed out to every single mother. To hell with your loneliness, protect your kids. Well, that was utterly mortifying to read and I hope things are better for you now. I can think of 2. First of all, my biological father. They got back together for a few weeks. He was a douche. I'd recently got my first pet, a ginger kitten, but I was having previously unknown allergy issues with it. Things were stabilizing for me though, and I was getting used to it when one day my new cat disappeared. My dad admitted that he let it out of the door because he knew I'd been struggling. I spent weeks searching but never found it. The second was my stepdad. He was actually a really good guy and head over heels in love with my mom. I actually miss him a lot. The reason he was one of the worst? Well, my mom died when I was 17 and overnight my stepdad changed. Within a month, he was in a relationship with another family member and suddenly he was violent and abusive, left me with no food or money, attacked me for accidentally breaking an ornament of his, and ultimately forced me to run away from home. I was on couch hopping for 9 months and never spoke to him again. Again, goddamn, I hope this person is doing better now. My mom is a serial dater. I have long since stopped paying attention to who she was dating. There was a few doozies, so let me talk about them. B. He came into my life when I was still forming self-awareness and memories. All I remember of him was screaming at my mom about leaving. G. A drunk who was verbally abusive. I remember him once deciding that I was not able to leave the table until I had finished every bite of the meatloaf that he made that night out of the blue. I threw up after stuffing myself with it. Mom stood there while this new rule was randomly enforced. He also called my brother the meaner term for a child born out of wedlock because he had been complaining of pain while standing up. Apparently, Apparently, that was a personal attack and he needed to cuss out a 5th grader. M, a foster parent of 8 very unwell boys. I was the only girl in the house. There was sexual abuse that I was blamed for from his foster boys and from his own son. He would scream at me like his foster children because I didn't want to play basketball with them. I was screamed at for humming. He eventually had to move me into his closet, so that's where I slept, while he would drop his clothing on me in the morning. He was cheating on my mom while she fed and clothed and parented all 11 children in that house. When they broke up, Mom blamed me because I had torn the family apart when I told a teacher about the sexual abuse I was experiencing. Question mark. Some guy she met at a bar, he was really interested in meeting her children, specifically 10-year-old me. Within 2 hours of him coming into the house, he had invited us all out to a nude beach nearby. It was very freeing, he insisted, and he thought I would love it there. Mom didn't make him leave the house for the night, and I slept in her room with the door locked. P. Of all the buttholes, this is who I hate the most. They dated on and off for a few years. I hated him from the minute I met him because my gut and my history had already labeled him as untrustworthy and a heel. I wasn't wrong. Not only did he cheat on my mom throughout their relationship, but he had hidden his AIDS status from my mom and also insisted culturally that he could not wear condoms. Mom thankfully hasn't tested positive for HIV, but part of me wants to deport that man. He was called Greg. He was an abusive prick. He used to lock me and my brothers out in the rain while my mom was at work and had no way of contacting her. He did it in all weathers. He broke my mom's arm in front of me and my brothers. One time, he grabbed my face so hard, his nails left a cut in my cheek. My mom and my 2 aunties got their own back though. My mom stole his change jar. His change jar had notes in. There were no 1 pences or 2 pences, only silvers and more. One auntie smashed every single thing he had. Car windows, house windows, TVs, everything. She also promised to beat him whenever she sees him, and she kept that promise, and has hit him 7 times so far on nights out. My other auntie kept reporting him to his boss for things that he hadn't done, but they couldn't disprove, like being horrible, swearing at her, and he was fired. He was a real piece of crap, and the actions of my family may have been drastic, if not illegal, but he mostly, definitely deserved this. You know, if you screw someone over or mess with someone and abuse their trust, their love enough over time, eventually they might just snap right back at you, and they might be snapping at you for years to come, and I don't think I'll feel sorry for you when they do. The worst definitely has to be my biological dad. I don't know too much about him, but he was an addict and later got sent to prison on the other side of the country for 5 years. He would write to my mom and me saying he would come back soon and everything would be good. At this time, I knew what state he was in, but I was being told that he was just working there. I was too young to understand. When I was 8, I got to talk to him on the phone for the first time since he got arrested. He told me that he had been arrested and wasn't actually working there. My whole family knew where he was, but wouldn't tell me otherwise, and hearing the truth both hurt and blew my mind, and I still have problems because of that today. After he got out of prison, he stayed on the other side of the country, got a construction job, eventually married a girl with 2 kids. Him and my mom were never married, by the way, and he and his wife had 2 more kids together. He later got back into his addictions. His wife left him in fear that her previous husband would find out about my dad's addictions and take his 2 kids back. He came back for a while and lived with his parents. I saw him maybe 2 times during this. Was weird talking to him. He later went back to the other side of the country, and last I've heard, he has been in and out of addiction centers and is likely in one of the many tense cities in that state. It's Cali. I don't know why I'm hiding it. Luckily, his dad, my grandpa, and most of the rest of his family are really good people. My grandpa keeps me updated on that side of the family, and I visit or go on vacation with them once in a while. Very nice people. 2 of my uncles are in the military. The other uncle suffers from alcohol addiction problems, but gets by best he can. So yeah, that's my story. Thanks to anyone who actually took the time to read it. You are most welcome. My dad has a habit of dating horrible women. The exception was his last girlfriend, who he thought of proposing to, but they broke up before that happened. He also had a thing for Nancy's. The first Nancy he dated was okay. I just hated living with her and sleeping on her living room floor. The second Nancy was an abusive douche to my brother and I. We were forced to sleep in her son's room, and my bed was next to the wall adjoined to my dad and her room. She would force us to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning to go to her mother's, to go on a bus, to go to a youth church. Her mother accused me of causing her cat to kill its kittens. This Nancy made me and my brother eat outside during the height of mosquito season without bug spray, while she, my dad, and her son ate inside. She also wouldn't let me eat anything while she wasn't home and was angry when I went over over to the apartment next door to watch a movie with the other little girl there and had Dorito chips because I was starving. This lady also grounded me for watching TV because I didn't wake her up in time to go on said church bus. I didn't have a clock in the room where I slept, and we weren't allowed to leave the room during the night. She didn't even have a working television. The third Nancy was a lazy, addicted scumbag who used my dad for money and treated her daughter and I like crap while treating my brother like he was king. Her daughter and I had to clean the entire apartment while she and my dad smoked and drank in the basement. We also weren't allowed snacks and had to make our own food. Mind you, these are all before I turned 13, and he dating these women for like a year at a time. My brother and I were frequently forced to move in with him and his girlfriends. We lived at our grandparents from the time I was 5, and they were my parents. I hated all of his girlfriends, except, like I said before, the last one. He's been single for a while now and seems to be doing okay. I rarely hear from him, but saw him this past Christmas, where he met my daughter for the first time. She's a year and a half old. We don't have a relationship really, but who knows, maybe he has changed, maybe not. For now, I keep my distance mostly for my daughter's sake and my sanity. 19 years of abuse and neglect isn't cancelled out in a night. So true. And what's with this theme of people neglecting their children, or people that they get with just openly neglecting their partner's children? Like, I don't get that. How could someone just sit by and let their children be unfairly treated? I mean, maybe this guy was like worried about, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but maybe this guy was like worried because he was living at her house. He had to play by her rules or else they wouldn't have anywhere to go for a while. I don't know. I should stop playing devil's advocate. People are messed up and stupid. Chad is the only swear word in our house. Our mom used to date this douchebag when my littlest brother was a couple years old, and sadly he picked up some of his habits. Funniest thing is, this butthole got karma big time. He adored his car so much, and every time he got a new one, he'd hit AITA. He used to abuse our mom for stupid reasons, and I had 2 kids who we all felt really bad for, especially his oldest. Hope his butt got even more karma. I was confused for him, and I was like, wait, he just hits Sadia every time he gets a new car? It's like a ritual for him, but no, it's just an accident every time? I find that hard to believe. My dad's girlfriend straight up bullied me. My dad is currently dating a woman who manipulated the hell out of me as a child. When I was 9 or 10, she would tell me my real mom wanted to adopt my younger sister so she would get more money once she filed for divorce on my father. One time, I left my flat iron plugged in the bathroom. Not on, just plugged in. The next time I was at their house, I went to straighten my hair and couldn't find my flat iron, so I asked her if she saw it. She told me she threw it out and giggled like a freak. Irked me so badly. I asked her why she would do that and begged her to tell me if she was kidding. I asked her to buy me a new one because I had spent my own money on it and really needed it for my poofy hair. She just laughed and kept telling me it was gone. I ended up spending $40 on a new one, and her response was that I wouldn't have had to do it if you hadn't left the first one plugged in. Fast forward to Christmas that year when I had one gift left under the tree. I opened it up excitedly to find, you guessed it, my frickin' flat iron. The one she threw away, and the one I had to replace because I left it plugged in the wall, same as you would a TV when it's not on. My dad's girlfriend crying, laughing, and I was just so confused and uncomfortable. I was 16 then, and 5 years later I still haven't forgotten that feeling. I feel like this may seem like nothing to some people, but this was all happening while she was trying to convince me to move out of my mom's house and in with her and my dad, accusing me of heavy substance use, starving myself, both never true, and telling me how I was the daughter she never had but always wanted. That crap was so confusing. I'm glad I'm away from that now and getting the help I need to move on. Moral of the story? Don't give your partner control over your kids. They might be nuts. I don't know, obviously, because I don't really have any intention of getting with a woman who already has children and whatnot, but it must be hard as, like, you know, a step parent of some sort, I suppose, to figure out where the line really is with telling your partner's kids what to do. I'm not referring to this situation, I'm just saying in general it's probably difficult. This woman in particular, though, sounds petty as all hell. The man she ended up marrying, he all out demanded respect, that my brother and I call him sir. He yelled a lot and whined when he didn't get his way. One time, I refused to call him sir, and he beat the crap out of me. Broke my hand and left bruises all up my back from being kicked on the ground. After that, he refused to take me to the hospital, so I, a boy, walked 5 5 miles to the hospital myself. Mom is still with him. She chose him over me. I don't see either of them anymore 20 years later. That is probably the greatest pain I can imagine. Like your parent, your guardian, whatever, choosing someone else over you, unjustly, that is. I mean, if you've done really bad things and it's just like they've had enough of you, I guess that's the case. But in this case, my father dated a girl which made my parents' couple break. This girl was poorly washed, had her 7 kids homeschooled, and her husband was working far away. Plus, she looked like a literal witch. Raised by my dad, he dated a pathological liar named Patricia for about 7 years. My dad was moving from Florida to Middlesex, Virginia. He met her in VA. She seemed nice enough. I was 19 and joining the Marines, so I didn't go to Virginia with him. Stayed with a friend in Florida till I left. Gave my Bronco and my dog Angel to my dad to look after while I was gone. On my first deployment, I get told that my dog got very sick. I got her one summer when I was 10 and raised her myself because my dad was constantly working to support us. I loved her like a daughter. Now I'm getting told that Angel is dying. The dogs with my dad go outside and free roam because they're well behaved and intelligent, so they believe she may have ingested some antifreeze because their nearest neighbor has old vehicles that could potentially be leaking. We were thick as thieves. My little girl dies and I'm not there to comfort her. Fast forward many years, I leave the military. Go to Virginia. My dad is leaving Trish and moving a few counties away, so I had to figure out somewhere else to stay. Asked him what happened. He said that she was cheating, lying, abusing pain meds, etc. He said his first big flag was when he witnessed a friend of Trish's call her a liar. Trish swore on her daughter's life that whatever the topic was true in tears. Thing is, my dad knew for a fact that Trish was lying. She had also pulled the same act on him. Things unraveled gradually after that, and then he decided to seek greener pastures. About a year later, I get a call from my dad. He was on Facebook chatting with an old mutual friend he had with Trish, who also turned away from her. Conversation somehow got on the subject of the woman's very vocal dogs. She told my dad that Trish had told her she should just poison them with antifreeze if she disliked her dogs. Trish then went on to say that she had gotten rid of one of her ex's dogs that way. 2 + 2 = 4, Trish murdered my Angel. My dad is currently dating someone my age. He's 53 and she's 22, so there's that. Boy, that's an uncomfortably big age gap right there. I kind of think once you're in your 20s, it's really up to you who you date. It takes 2 to tango, and, just try and make wise choices that are good for you, Don't get with a douchebag who might abuse your trust or manipulate you. That's all I have to say about it, really. Well, pretty much every guy my mom has dated thus far has been a butthole in some way, shape, or form, but I'd say the worst was my stepfather, who was also the father to both my little brother and sister. See, my mom just turned 16 when she had me. I spent the first few years of my life with my grandparents while my mom went off to college. When she came back when I was 6, she brought back the man that would make my life a living hell for the next 4 years. My grandparents did shelter me a bit too much, and because of that, my stepfather tried to effectively rewrite me into his definition of a son, someone I was the exact opposite of, because of how old I was. This was effectively impossible, and it made him angry. I was excessively punished for some of the smallest things. I forget what it was for, but once he wanted me to clean our entire dining room and kitchen floor with a toothbrush, a good 200+ square feet of tile. I got done with 1 row before my mom stepped in. Thankfully, he would force me into doing things I simply didn't want to do. He forced me onto a carnival ride at our annual state fair that I was terrified to go on. I'm so thankful the guy I sat next to comforted me through it. There were some things he forced me into that left me with physical scars. We once threw a football at each other for so long that my thumbs started to bleed. They are really faint, but you can still see the scars from the day 15 years later. Time and time again, he was met with resistance in turning me into his definition of a son, and every time it happened, it only aggravated him more and more. It didn't help that in those first 6 years I developed a deep relationship with my grandparents, only for him to hate both of them with a burning passion for some reason. He finally died when I was 10 by rolling his car doing probably 80 miles per hour and got thrown out of the window for not wearing a seatbelt. Despite all of that, I don't hate him. The damage he did is certainly still there. I mean, he came in at the worst possible point in my life, and I'm not entirely sure if the damage could ever be truly repaired, but he did give me two of the best things in my life, my brother and sister. My brother is in his first year of college, going to ASU on a full ride from National Guard, and my sister is in her sophomore year of high school. When my brother graduated high school, he told me that he's the person he is today, mostly because of me, and him saying that was like getting a return on all of those years of hell. He was only 4 when my stepfather died, and it was years before my mom started dating again. Since she was the only income for our family, I was left with basically raising my 2 siblings while going through middle and high school, but that one line made it all worth it. Well, it truly warms my heart to find a story with a nice silver lining in it. When I was younger, probably around 9 or so, my mom dated this guy named Jim. I don't remember much about him except that he smelled weird. But after they broke up, she tried to delete herself and she was in the hospital for a few days. I remember her telling someone on the phone the night before that we, her 4 kids, would be fine without her. Thankfully, it's been 18-ish years later, and she's alive and well, and has been married for almost 16 years. As for my dad, he dated this awful woman named Tracy off and on for 7 or so years. She was always talking crap. She made mine and my dad's relationship horrible. She also made terrible eggs. When they broke up, my brother and I jumped for joy. He's been married for 4.5 years now to an incredible woman who I love dearly, and me and him are so close now. As soon as Tracy left, our relationship drastically changed for the better. I think this all goes to show how important it is to be brave. You gotta be brave to be able to walk away from a situation that you've grown used to out of fear of what the unknown is, because you might be like, yeah, things are bad now, but maybe they'll get better. But you need that bravery to be like, no, I need to walk away and whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. It could be a bit worse. It could be a bit better. But, you know, if you don't have the bravery to face life itself, really, when you're having a tough time, then you'll never know if you can actually find that happiness that you deserve. Hopefully that made sense. What is the most messed up thing your parents have done to you? While growing up, my parents would argue every so often, and it would escalate to screaming matches, and it pretty much sucked. This went on until I was 4 or so. The last time it happened, my father struck my mother, and she decided it was time for us to leave. We lived out in the country where neighbors weren't around for miles. The closest neighbor we had was about 7 miles away. My mother grabbed my baby brother and headed out the door. I was already outside, avoiding them and their screaming. She told me to follow her, so I did. As we were leaving the property, my father yells out for my mother to come back, which she refuses to do so. Come back, or I'll dispense a bullet in alt account 9229. She turned and refused again, and I turned around in disbelief. My father threatened to shoot me if she didn't come back. I just stood there, not knowing what to do. He called out to her name, "Come back now." I stood there as my mother walked back to grab my hand. As she reached for it, my father pulled the trigger. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital 2.5 weeks later. My father actually did it. And that is the worst thing either of my parents have done to me. My dad came out when I was 15. My mother, a religious zealot, pretty much manipulated my view of him, declaring that he was destroying not only their marriage, but also our family, and dragged me to love one-out conferences which were, for all intents and purposes, brainwashing, bigoted, gay-bashing parties. She forced me into Christian counseling and cried to me daily about how horrible he was. I found myself distancing myself from my father, whom I had considered my best friend for most of my life. Eventually, about 3 months later, I realized that she was one of the most hateful and hurtful human beings on earth and came back to my dad asking for forgiveness. He's sitting next to me while we are vacationing in Hawaii right now, and my mother and I have a weird distant relationship now. My stepdad, or one of my mom's pimps, depending on how you look at it, stole my high school girlfriend, got her addicted to illegal substances, and turned her into a hooker. He even told me he was going to do it as soon as he met her. Okay, I think that might be the worst one. That is the worst one, and I hope that guy's in prison, or dead, preferably from horrible, unnatural causes. I married a woman for her papers. Her parents were illegal immigrants. She was born in Mexico 3 months before they made their exodus. When she was 25 years old, she found out that the social security number that her mom was using was actually hers. She was born in Ontario, Canada, not Mexico. As a result of being raised thinking she was an illegal, she dropped out of high school believing she wouldn't be able to graduate high school without a social security number. Damn, that mom kinda screwed her kid over. My parents guilted me into loaning them $8,000 $60,000, over half my paycheck for a year, when I was 17. It is now 4 years later, and I'm pretty sure they have no intention of paying me back. I think my dad forgot it ever happened. My mom and dad separated when I was 8. When I turned 15, he was diagnosed with colon cancer and died a year later. On his deathbed, she did everything she could to talk him into marrying her again, all while he was extremely medicated. She had him brought to out home for hospice so he could be with his children. He never agreed to marry her again, regardless of her constant attempts, but he did make the mistake of giving her power of attorney. He passed away, and she took all of his estate for herself and conned my sisters and I into signing away parts of our inheritance while we were still young and dumb. All 3 of us, 14 years later, still have financial trouble when we could have had our lives and education taken care of by our hard-working father. We no longer acknowledge her as anything but our birth giver now that we're all grown up and know what she did to our family. His death day is the 21st of July. Rest in peace, Dad. I understand wanting a lot of money for yourself, I get it, but when you're so greedy that you're like, no, the money's only mine, screw my children, they can go to hell for all I care, it's just, what the hell, you are too greedy. Mine used my social security and other personal information to drain $76,000 from my savings account, which I had built up over the course of saving every penny working in a crappy used bookstore for 5 years while selling Magic the Gathering cards on the side in high school.
Hey, Brandine, we gotta dip into the boys' Magic the Gathering card money.
That is how that conversation went down. You can't convince me otherwise. Sorry your parents stole all your money. My dad has been saving up for me to go to college since I was really young. When the time finally came, I applied to my top choice of college, and I got in. I even got a financial aid package with the school covering $47,000 of the $56,000 bill. The first payment is due in less than a month, and my dad gets the idea to tell me he can't afford for me to go anymore. It turns out he took all the money he saved for me and spent it to fix his house so he could sell it. But that's not the end. He bought my sister a car, one that she relies on to get to work and school. My other sister dropped out of high school a few months before she would have graduated. She also has no desire to drive, but yet she convinced my father to take the car from my sister just so she wouldn't have it. Sounds like a case of sibling resentment that's been going on for a bit too long. My mom's husband got sent to jail. While he was there, I let my mom stay with me as he was the provider in their home. She ran my phone bill up over $2,000 in collect calls. I also helped get her on assistance so she could help with rent as we moved to a bigger place to be able to fit everyone. I first had to pay off a bank account over $200 that was in overdraft for her to be able to get money. When she finally got her assistance check, she put me on the phone with the butthole so he could tell me that she sent the whole thing to him as he just got out of jail and needed money. That jerk-off went to jail for child smut. Then to boot, she took off to go stay with him without a goodbye, and I haven't seen her in 4 years, and she refuses to come back. We were really close before all of this. Let me tell you what my old man did to me before I was old enough to talk. Because my father loved me so very much, he decided that we should share the same name. My mom had the foresight to be wary of this. She figured with the same name, financial mishaps could easily be blamed on the wrong person. My dad assured her that due to our age difference, that could never happen. However, money got tight around the time I turned 1, and my dad didn't want to cut back. So, what did he do? He opened 5 new lines of credit with my social security number and maxed them all out in a matter of months. That might have been okay if he had ever intended to pay them back, but of course he didn't. When I turned 18 and applied for, well, anything, I got a resounding no. I decided to check my credit, and what did I see? Well, you've already heard the story, so yeah, 5 maxed out credit cards. But that's not all. He also assigned medical bills to me, as well as large amounts of other miscellaneous stuff. I've been fighting this crap from the onset of my adult life, and no, I haven't been able to resolve it all yet. Some things would require that I go to court, and call me old-fashioned, but I can't sue my parents. Screw the credit system, and screw irresponsible parents. Clearly, there was a reason why your mother was wary in the beginning. My parents have each dated and married and divorced people that are younger than my brothers and me. The worst thing, however, that I've witnessed my dad do is push my grandma down a flight of stairs. My mom does horrible things all of the time. When I was a child, she once took my brothers and me to a guy's house while my stepdad was at work. They put us in front of the TV with a pizza and had loud SX in the bedroom. They got divorced while I was in college and didn't tell me. They pretended to be together for 4 months until I decided to randomly come home to surprise them. It was rather surprising to see all my dad's stuff gone and pictures of my mom and some other guy up all over the place. When I was 17, I woke up at 3:30 a.m. a.m. to see two men I had never seen before talking with my parents. I was informed I was being sent to a wilderness program in Utah, and that we were going to be leaving in a few minutes. I was forced to get dressed, and I was driven to the airport by these two thugs. The next morning, I was freezing in the Utah mountains. My mother is terrible with money, so when I went to college and started getting refund checks to help pay for my rent, she started asking me for money. She always promised that she would pay me back in time. She just needed the money at the moment. And now I'm even caring for my underage brother since she could not deal with him anymore. By the end of this semester, I was 3 months late on my own rent payments after having paid for a few of her own rent payments, her taxes, her car troubles, and her having filed affidavits to bring her parents, she's from the Philippines, over here. And even though she got nearly $1,800 a month, she works as a nurse at a big local hospital, she couldn't afford to pay me back even without paying her rent, dropping our cell phone plan, revoking our insurance, and not paying her car payments, on which I'm the lead signer. Yeah, people who are bad with money, especially family members who are fine with not only the erosion of their relationship with you, but also just generally being a pain in the butt in your life, God, they're the worst. My mom decided to leave my dad on Christmas morning when I was 5. Her way of telling him was to just take me and leave. We went to her mother's house where Mike, a guy she used to date before my dad, just happened to be. Truthfully, Dad had been cheating on her too, and he was on illegal substances and was an alcoholic. Anyway, I remember that one night we went to Mike's house, and I remember laying on the floor crying about wanting to go home. I remember telling Mom that I smelled the devil's lettuce, and Mike complimented me on how smart I was. Anyway, she divorced Dad, married Mike, and divorced him, and married again by September. As mentioned, Dad was an alcoholic and an addict, and that continued for many years. He's admitted to trying every substance except for one, as he was afraid of the side effects. I remember one night when Dad was really depressed, and he told me about how he tried to self-delete himself. He thought about doing it, but then thought about me and decided not to. The only way I could make sense of why he was telling me this was that he wanted to see me hurt, that he gained some sort of pleasure from my pain, and I decided that I would never let him see that he hurt me again. I have very few memories from before my parents split, and I only saw my dad on the weekends after that, and he lived in his parents' basement. Still does, actually. And I spent most of my time there with my grandparents. Growing up, I saw my dad not as a parent, but as someone who I could play video games with. When my grandparents would be planning a vacation, they would let my mom know so she could plan an excuse so as to not send me there without them. There were some rough times and so many broken promises. I remember once when I went downstairs to see Dad and the door was locked and I knocked and didn't get a response and his car was there, so I went back upstairs and told my grandparents. My grandfather went down and ended up breaking the door to get in and found my dad passed out after getting really drunk and taking a lot of sleeping pills. There were so many times I remember when Dad's friends came over and they'd go to the other room to buy and sell and smoke whatever. So many times I know that he put his pleasures above my safety, driving drunk or stoned or taking me along when he was buying illegal substances. Things were bad to the point where we had discussed what to do if I answered the door and it was the police looking for him, or one of his buddies. I was to ask if they had a warrant, and if they didn't, to close the door. I was probably in about 7th grade when I was upstairs getting ready for church when there was a knock at the door. I went to the door and the man identified himself as a detective and asked for my dad. I asked if he had a warrant and he didn't, so I started closing the door. My grandmother heard and came to the door and told him he was downstairs and that she'd go get him. I was thinking she just sold that out, but she knew that the detective was there to talk to him about him getting robbed the night before. I remember growing up wondering if my Christmas presents were stolen, as I'd sometimes get Nintendo games that were in rental boxes instead of retail packaging. I remember things getting stolen from the house and appearing a few weeks later, meaning that he pawned them somewhere. All that said, he claims to be clean now. Got attacked by a dog when I was 5 to 6, torn the left side of my face up pretty badly. My parents sue when they get informed I was the third and most serious attack from the dog. Later, animal abuse was found to have been a factor. A settlement was made, but the money was to be released to me when I turned 18. Fast forward till around my 16th birthday, and I really want a car. My parents tell me with my permission they can access the money early, and I of course agree and get my Honda and am content. Then I turn 18. My parents sit me down and tell me that the best plan is to keep the money in a CD to gain interest. I agreed to this as well. deal. It wasn't until my 20th that I finally started to think of uses for the money, and also that I had never actually seen any statements or actual sum of money on paper from a bank or anything. For the first time, I aggressively asked my parents about it and was told the truth. You probably guessed it, but at 16, when I first gave them permission to use that money, they just used it like a new bank account, drained it dry. I don't hold any grudges. They suck with money and are impulsive. They could never afford to repay either. I'm glad I never really saw how much it was until they told me, because I might have acted like some stereotypical trust fund character. Parents do messed up stuff, but I could have had it a lot worse. Live and learn. Hanging on the edge of tomorrow. Good on this guy for being able to take it in such strides. Like he says, live and learn. I would be absolutely livid, that is for sure. But like, overall, it's good that this person isn't in such dire straits or anything that they're like, bitter about it. And they're just getting on with their life, and that's cool. All respect to them. My parents got divorced when I was 8. Not a big deal. That kind of stuff happens all the time. Well, neither of them were particularly good parents. I started off living with my dad. He has huge anger issues. Literally anything will set him off and throw him into a violent tantrum. After a few years of this, I moved in with my mom in Texas. My dad and I lived in Tennessee. Well, my mom was a huge illegal substance abuser. She'd frequently use a lot of hard stuff. I could see needle marks. I don't know what she did, and frankly, I don't care. About the time I was 15, her new husband had left her and she just went insane. She would leave for weeks at a time. She would stay in hotels with strange men, and she would spend all her money on illegal substances. We frequently had our utilities turned off since she wouldn't bother paying bills. I wanted to stop living like that, so I wanted to get a job, even a crappy one, somewhere. Anywhere. However, I didn't have a driver's license. I had to take driver's ed in the state I was in. I actually asked my mom once if she would stop drinking and doing substances long enough for me to get a license and get a job. She laughed at me and just said no. I had to contact her boss once to see if they knew where she was. He felt bad for me and took me to the grocery store and bought me food, so I had food in the house. Eventually, I got tired of living like that, so I had to move back in with my dad. A few weeks after I left, she was evicted since she stopped making payments on the house, and even spent some time in prison for producing illegal substances in her house and a bunch of other messed up crap. She recently died from heart failure. As terrible of a mother as she was, it was still one of the worst times of my life. My dad didn't change much in the years I lived with my mom. He had a new wife, and he treated her and me like complete crap. He made me live essentially in a closet. If I said something he didn't like, he'd threaten me. One time, he grabbed me by the hair, threw me against the wall, and threatened to almost kill me. I immediately contacted the police. They closed the investigation pretty much immediately. At the age of 17, my dad kicked me out after an argument about, I kid you not, our ISP. The police came and wouldn't even listen to me. I was a straight A student in high school, never had a disciplinary record of any kind, and they just called me a delinquent and left. Screw the police. I told the school what happened, and I got a social services guy to work with me. I moved to my girlfriend's place down the street, and I got my car in my name. At 18, I went to college at Georgia Tech. I put myself through school. I spent 2.5 years as a TA there, and I graduated with a degree in computer science. I immediately got a job as a software engineer upon graduation, and I'm making as much as my dad does, and I'm less than half his age. Screw my parents. My dad actually sold my motorcycle while I was in college. He owes me $2,000 because of that, but I'm not even going to bother bringing it up because I don't feel like putting up with his threats anymore. Maybe it's the way I read it, but there was a point where I was like, oh, it feels like he just remembered the motorcycle thing. Like, this whole thing was like an emotional roller coaster between the Harry Potter treatment, the mother, dying, whether or not she was a bad mother and stuff, obviously emotional time for the writer. Point is, this all sucks and I feel for you. When I was younger and had my first bank account, my mother forced me to put her name on it, and my dad helped me get the account. She said that because I was a minor, she could legally get her name on the account even if I said no, and being young, I believed her. I had about $2,000 in the account saved from my first job and such. I checked my account one day afterwards, and it was at negative $2,000. I was super shocked and infuriated. Another time, after paying off the bank when I was just turning 18, once I just hit 18, she said she wanted no more to do with me since she was no longer getting child support from my dad and was going to move to Florida. I gave her the rent money for the next month. We paid a month in advance just before she left because she was the one who always mailed it out and it was in her name. The next month after she left, I received a notice of eviction because she didn't pay the rent with the money and instead used it to fund her trip to Florida. Last but not least, right before she died, she took out a credit card in my sister's name and charged up to $15,000. My sister found out after she had passed, and because there was no proof, she was forced to pay off the 15 grand. She cut my sandwich into rectangles instead of triangles. Forgive me, I just wanted a little bit of brevity in this depressing topic. My mother's shortlist. Spent student loan money I sent from Japan. About $800, derided me hugely for not driving with my drunk aunt, chastised me for not wanting to carry her prescription of benzos through China with no script before the night of my wedding. On a trip to her place from out of town, she invited her boyfriend, who had a restraining order against me over the fact that he robbed us for our rent, causing us to get evicted, so I chased him with a bat. She had a restraining order against him too for beating her up. I had to just leave and go back home. She invited my ex to her house and fixed her up with some big black guy while we were freshly broken up at 18 years old. They screwed in my old bedroom. She adopted a guy who me and my friends warned her about. He was later arrested for attempted murder, beat her boyfriend in my apartment because she found out he had hit on my girlfriend, and now refuses to see my child, her only grandchild, because I insisted on her sobriety to see him. I could go on. Mom is kind of a C-word. There must be so much internal conflict for people whose parents are just bad and horrible to them, but it's like they're your parent and they're the only one that you've got, so you want them in your life to some degree, and you want them to be better for themselves and you. Like, God, I can't imagine. This is probably going to pale in comparison to most other people, but I can think of two things my mother did to me that were kind of messed up. The most messed up thing my dad did was leave when I was a baby, but meh, screw that guy. 1. She cut a hole in my bedroom door big enough for the cat to get through so it could get away from the new dog. The cat decided to habitually use my bed as a litter box. I was 13 at the time, so there wasn't much I could do but try to block the hole. She would yell at me for blocking the hole. Meanwhile, my bed is reeking of cat urine. No matter how much I tried to clean it, it just stunk, and eventually so did all the rest of the things in my room. I was not very popular at school that year. Eventually, I got a new bed, but only after much whining on my part. The carpet still smelled like cat pee, so I never wanted to have friends over or anything like that. Fast forward a few years. Considering that my mother seemed to value pets' comfort and security over mine, to the point where it created an unpleasant living environment for me, I decided to move out as soon as I turned 18. Although I had saved up money for my car myself, my mom's name was on the title because I was a minor. The insurance and everything else was also in her name, again because I was a minor. 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, I made arrangements and started getting ready to leave. When she found out I was planning on leaving, she took the tags off of my car and turned them into the Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV. The reason that this is messed up is because now I would have to get the car re-tagged. What that entails is getting the car inspected. In this state, before a vehicle can be tagged, you must take it to a mechanic and get it certified as road safe. I had to have a few minor repairs. It was my first car, so it was a used 1993 Ford station wagon. It was bound to need work eventually anyway. But of course, the amount I had to spend was enormous because I took it to a mechanic, and I was an 18-year-old girl with no concept of anything mechanical. It came to about $300 in 2002. That was 2 weeks' paycheck at Arby's, where I had been working since I was 15 to save up enough money to get the hell out and go to college. But I did have my savings, so I dipped into it. After the inspection, I had to pay for the tags. I had to put a huge down payment on a new insurance policy because my mom canceled mine a week before she took my tags off of my car, but she still took my money when I came to her with my monthly payment, so I had to get high-risk insurance for being an uninsured motorist, even though I had no clue I was. I also had to pay taxes on
my car. That's right, I had to pay frickin' taxes on a car I already paid my frickin' taxes on when I bought it. If I had been the one to turn in my tags, I would have gotten a refund from the DMV for the tags and taxes and all that. Since my mom was the one to do it, she got $250 for free. All in all, between fees, repairs, and my new awesomely high insurance rates, I spent close to $1,000 just getting my piece of crap car that probably wasn't even worth $1,000 back on the road. Happy birthday to me. I didn't have enough money to move. I had only planned on living in a rented home for the summer before I went away to college, so I hadn't allotted more than $1,500 for it. Now, unless I wanted to dip into the college fund I had set up for myself, I was stuck at home.
What question did you refuse to answer in a job interview? What's your zodiac sign? At first, I thought it was a joke, but he went on to explain in detail that it was very important that all the signs of his employees were compatible with his to prevent drama in the workplace. Then he started telling me about past lives. It was a weird interview. Why should we hire you when you just got married and will probably be starting a family soon? I initially refused to answer, but couldn't resist by the end of the interview, telling them that I'd had my tubes tied for years and literally couldn't have kids. My race. They were interviewing to fill several positions at an office near downtown where they were in need of Spanish-speaking workers because the area served is mostly Hispanic. The interviewer asked me what is my race and where is my family from. He asked this because he saw that I am fluent in Spanish. I am mixed but look very white. He seemed a little perturbed that I was fluent in his native language. He kept questioning my race and why do I speak Spanish. I let him know that I have spoken Spanish since I first learned to speak. I had dual primary languages in my home. I took Spanish in high school and college. I was hired by college as a Spanish tutor, yet he doubted my knowledge because of my light skin. He did this to a girl I was chatting with in the waiting area too. I could hear her interview because they were doing them in cubicles, not private. With her, he insisted she couldn't really speak Spanish. The girl was black, but she was from Belize. Anyhow, we were both hired even though he failed us on our spoken language portions. She and I wrote grievances and had him removed, as well as our scores corrected. He interviewed another girl I knew who looks very Hispanic but barely speaks Spanish, and he does not write it. He gave her a 100. At my office, I found out he had given anyone that looked white or black very low scores, even if they aced the interview. Well, you know what they say, another day, another case of casual workplace racism. What social media do I use, and that I would be required to friend a member of the HR department? Luckily, nothing happened. There is a big trial going on at the time over employers' rights to spy on their employees online, so they didn't push it. This is kind of related to something I was thinking about the other day, in that the internet used to be a specific place that you would go to, like, just a computer, but nowadays it's on your phone, it's connected to your work, your life in general. It's just inescapable now. Honestly, I think the internet was way cooler before it became mainstream and with the advertisements, corporations and stuff. And well, you could turn off the internet at a time, but now it's just interconnected with your whole life. And that kind of sucks. I mean, can I leave my phone at home when I go for a walk? Sure I can, but I'm also thinking about work emails that I might need to respond to immediately. And just overall, it's harder to pull yourself away from the internet than it ever was in the early 2000s. Anyway, it's just genuinely good that you didn't have to do that because privacy is important, including in the workspace. What church do you attend? I told them I didn't really think it was relevant to doing the job. They thought otherwise. In the course of one interview, I was asked, are you married? Do you have kids? Are you pregnant? When do you plan on becoming pregnant? How old are you? The interviewer then proceeded to tell me she needed to ask these questions because the last LAA she hired was pregnant and left for maternity leave within 5 months, and the interviewer was not happy with that. The kicker, I was interviewing at a civil law firm and being interviewed by a paralegal. I'm a girl and have a trade and have always worked with only men. Most interviews bring up the subject in a polite way, like situational questions asking what I would do if a coworker was being sexist, etc. One particular interview with a company called Redacted, the interviewer straight out asked if I have a boyfriend. I said no, more out of shock. He continued on to say that I'm very young and around the age where I will probably get pregnant. I just sat there and stared. He then asked me if I planned on getting pregnant because if so, they would not hire me. Every single question he asked was specifically about the fact that I'm a girl and there were no job-related questions. I just said, thanks, but no thanks. Well, if they made you that uncomfortable, it's probably for the best. The only reason why I think they might not have asked any work-related questions was probably because, as you already stated, this is an industry you are familiar with, I believe, and maybe your resume was just superb, so they didn't really feel the need to ask you any questions about that. I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like they were already interested in hiring you, except they were worried about you going on maternity leave. Which, if I were to play devil's advocate and put myself in that position, yeah, it would be kind of annoying to hire someone and then after a few months it's just, well, bye-bye. But at the end of the day, I also understand why women going out for jobs and careers would be really annoyed at that question being asked regularly. I mean, it comes up a lot in this topic. I once got asked what my parents did for a living. It was for a cleaning position. I was like, what? This guy asked me a bunch of word puns and riddles. I answered one thinking he was joking, then asked him what the point was, and he didn't know. Later in the interview, he asked me if I could promise I wouldn't get pregnant for my first year there. And in the end, I got the job. I had a few in the only interview I ever did for a farm machinery sales agent. Can you safely say that you won't have any serious accidents whilst working here? Have you ever been pregnant, or are you going to become pregnant in the next 8 months? Have you ever had a boyfriend, and if yes, did you have sex while together? Are you still together? Again, I can understand the perspective and reasoning from an employer's standpoint of why they ask these questions, but to a degree, it's just like, where do you get off? Do you have any medical or mental issues? My medical history is my business, not theirs. I work at a major university and we have an office of disability services which can assist you in accommodating a disability, etc. So I technically do have a disability according to the university's parameters, and therefore I fall under this protection. I've been shopping around for a different job at the same institution, and in one interview they actually asked me what my disability was. I was shocked they would ask, since that is pretty expressly forbidden by university policy, and refused to answer. I didn't get a call back, but based on them asking, I didn't want to work there either. I may have dropped an anonymous note to HR about it. So I understand that this is to some degree not down, I guess, but I also actually don't really see the issue in asking. Like, I don't know, I've got learning difficulties, for example. If someone asks, I'm not really insulted by them asking. I'm more annoyed in situations where people make assumptions about me because I have a certain learning difficulty. What's even more annoying than that is when people just make assumptions based on their lack of knowledge on what I have. Like, I don't know, this one just seems kind of petty in my opinion. Would you and your wife be interested in this traveling swingers club I help run? We could show you the town, get you to meet new people. It'll be fun. I was the interviewer. I'm a guy. Interviewee was a girl. And in case you were curious about what question to never ask in an interview, this is among the top 10. No, I didn't answer it. I just said that we're out of time and I had to go. HR will show you out. Someone will be in contact with you. See you later. Goodbye. Nice knowing you. Too bad you can't stay. What happened was that she was banned from ever applying, and since Silicon Valley is so close-knit, I'm sure the HR types got the word out that she was a walking sexual harassment suit waiting to happen. I had an employer actually ask if I was a Christian. I'm not. He said that they follow Christian principles in their business and they'd like to know how I would fit in. I told him that it's illegal to ask that question and I'm not comfortable answering it. He ended the interview right there. I didn't get the job, which I'm glad for because working there sounds like my personal hell. I should have sued and just taken it easy for a few years. The CIA asked me what laws I would be willing to break if I was hired by them. I didn't really know how to answer and I said I would have to know more about the situation. I didn't get the job. I may not refuse to answer a question outright, but depending on the personality of the interviewer, I will make jokes about the questions, especially if it's obvious that they think the questions are stupid too. The biggest one for me is, what is your biggest flaw? If I know the interviewer is receptive to jokes, I'll reply with something like, a low tolerance for irrelevant questions. We had a good laugh about it and moved on to the next question in the interview. Interview question at a small consulting firm in DC. Did great work, friends there with nice salaries and benefits. I put down on my resume, as a consultant at another firm, this line, paraphrasing for privacy and not doxing myself, optimized performance and logistics of new product line, increasing profit margins by 30% at big firm. It's one of my huge achievements, and leaving out details was never a problem for any other consulting firms like McKinsey, for example. I didn't mention who that big client on the resume that I was working for was, because most of them are supposed to be confidential. The interviewer's eye fell on that bullet, and as I revealed a couple of details like industry, my role, how I did the job, the achievement, etc., she insisted on asking who the client was, which doesn't really matter at that point. I kept rebuffing her, stating that I can't reveal my clients or the product lines still in development at the time due to confidentiality agreements. This went on for 5 minutes until the interview basically derailed and she ended it, telling me that I was uncooperative and I shouldn't expect a call. After cursing my luck and damning that wretched woman, seriously, who insists on asking such a stupid question? I can't reveal who it is because I breached contract, and in consulting, you should respect your client's privacy. I did get a call a couple of weeks later from a board member who heard about my interview and offered me a job. It was a good year, and my interviewer got flack some months after she left the company because she started revealing details about her clients, which got an entire team at that firm in trouble because of breach of contract. Big lesson, kids. If you have a confidentiality agreement that is still ongoing and hasn't expired, you should respect it, even in an interview for another job. Otherwise, kiss your career goodbye. I mean, it's kind of a good idea to just generally respect contracts that you sign in general, and if you're not sure about them, read them very, very carefully. Or pay someone to read them, because reading contracts can be super boring. I sat in on an interview for a PA with my boss. When on the subject of marriage and kids, my boss asked the interviewee if she had married out of love or if her family had arranged it. She answered love, and we thought that was the end of it. He then proceeded to ask if she was raising her kids as Sikhs and if she would be comfortable working in an environment with lots of men. I cringed so much in that interview, but the lady held her own and is basically still working for us. There was no malice in what my boss was asking. He was genuinely just interested in her culture, but went the complete wrong way about it. Just the other week, when we were all out for a meal, he kept asking her if his pronunciation of basmati was right. The best of it is she came from an Indian family but has lived the Western culture all her life. She's just as clueless as he is, but finds it all very hilarious. I was actually asked for the username and password to my Facebook, Twitter, and any other social media accounts I may have. I flat said, no, that information will not be forthcoming. The interviewer looked up as though to say, just who the heck do you think you are? And replied, excuse me? I replied that I never saw the use or need for social media. I have the ability to instantly message, call, or go to meet people within my circle in person, and I felt that social media was a tool further used to divide us rather than bring us together. He just stared at me until I finally said, I follow a 3P rule when I'm online. I never post anything I don't want my parents, a priest, or a predator finding out, which means you can rest assured that there will be no impropriety to harm your business. I'm here to make money by making you money. He continued to stare at me, and I finally said, I'm sorry, I seem to be wasting your time. I thank you anyway, and you have a wonderful day. I got a call 3 weeks later, same guy. He actually tried looking me up and couldn't find me or a reference to me. I didn't get the job, but I did get considered. The moral to this tale? Follow the 3P rule and never ever use your real name, nor should you ever allow anyone else to use your real name if you can at all control it. Okay, now first off, obviously, interviewer, massive invasion of privacy, stupid question to ask, but also, while right, this person definitely went off on something that they've been thinking about for a long time in their feelings of social media that just wasn't necessary. And I say that as a bit of a hypocrite because while it is my job to read these for you and give my thoughts on some of them, I do absolutely go on tangents. So the interview questions can be very different from what we're used to in the West. It is common to ask what your parents do, if you're married or plan on getting married, how much alcohol you can drink. This is not to determine if you have a drinking problem, but because after work drinking with coworkers is a big part of Korean work culture. So the more booze you can handle, the better. How much money you have, religion, and when you apply for a job, you have to send a photo of yourself along with your application. If you're not deemed good looking enough, and often if you're black or Indian or another undesirable race, you won't get the job. It is slowly changing though. Anyone else pick up on the discomfort in my voice as I was quoting that? Why is a pretty girl like you looking for a job? You should just find a rich guy and get married. For context, I was fresh out of high school at 17 plus, and this was the first interview I had ever done in my life at a small shipping yard for the position of a clerk. I decided to go to college after that. It does get worse as I approach marriageable age, as constant barrages of questions on my plans to get married and how many kids I want to have get into the interview instead of what I want to bring to the table at work and discussing my career prospects. Women have a big challenge when it comes to being taken seriously at work, especially if you look a certain way. Yes, I do get a lot of probing why I didn't try my hands at sales, as it would be just too easy for you to get a lot of sales during the time I was at marketing. Previous salary. It's none of their business. I will talk about the salary range that I'm interested in, but answering previous salary questions will only screw you. That is certainly true. Never ever disclose your previous salary with a new potential employer.
Well, I refuse to answer if I was religious and not a fornicator.
Well, that's all right if you don't want to tell us, sir, because God already knows. I assume this was for an employer that had a very religious tilt. When I lived in DC, I had an interview with the mayor's office. Mind you, he was a mayor I didn't particularly like. When I got there, it was like 75 people waiting in a big room. When it was finally my turn, they brought me into another room. The first 5 minutes were standard interview questions, but the two 20-year-olds conducting the interview were completely uninterested. Neither of them looked up from their Blackberries once. I was getting extremely irritated, as I knew I had much more political experience than them anyway. So when one of them, with her face still in her Blackberry, said, "Tell me 5 things you love about Mayor Fenty," I had it. I said, "I think we're done here," and got up and left. That got them to look at me. Not a question so much as a request. Was a senior in college in 2012, so the job market was still for crap, and anyone who had graduated college in the last 4 to 5 years was actively fighting for any and all open positions of any sort still. Be it in waiting tables, answering phones, landscaping, nannying, under the table work, and obviously any entry-level positions. So I managed to get an interview with a marketing firm. I'm sure most of you know where this is going. It was a direct marketing service where you go door to door. My first interview goes well, and I'm a bit confused as this was in an office park suite office. They purportedly have 55 employees, yet this office suite was 2 offices and a small front desk area for the secretary. Where was everyone's desks, I asked myself. Later that night, I received a call back for a second interview, so for a second weekend in a row, I head back to my hometown, miss my current job, and 2 weekends in a row worth of cash working at a late-night restaurant, and gas money for 2 round trips, totaling in at around $100 in gas, 2 full tanks, and a loss of almost an entire $375 paycheck for that half of the month, plus a solid $150 in tips for each weekend missed. Showed up for the second interview, and instead of sitting in that little office and answering more questions, meeting people around the office and the like, they take me and 6 other people outside. We're then told we will be going out in the field for the day and knocking on doors. None of us were told about this, so all 4 of us females are in interview suits in heels. I start immediately hounding the interviewer and insist I am being told where I'm being taken, and he says he isn't at liberty to disclose that. So I confrontingly state, "Let me get this straight. You want me, a 20-something female, to get into a car with out-of-state plates with 3 men I've never met before, to go somewhere unknown, to walk around somewhere unknown for an unknown amount of time on the fly, and I have to turn my cell phone off?" He just looks at me like a moron after I've spelled out how sketchy this all is. So after some awkward silence, I continue, "How dare you lie to myself and all of these other clearly desperate folks about every aspect of this job and cost me money to get here. Screw you if you think I'll come with you, and screw you again if you think I won't go into details on this to the BBB." It's then that he flips out and follows me as I head back into the office park. The interview room now has been retransformed into the CEO's office, nameplate and everything. When they asked me what I was doing, I demanded my resume back from their pile and told them I'd be spreading the word and make sure others know before coming in here. They freaked out, offered to pay me back for my gas to try and prevent me from reporting them. I let them write me a check, and just as I was leaving their office/interview room, a new slew of kiddos my age were shuffling in for their ill-fated interviews. I warned them all loudly and cursed out the CEO again, and was
followed out by all 8 people. They were supposed to interview again. Being a journalism student, I did the only thing worse than reporting them, which I also did. I got in contact with a local reporter for the paper who is a friend of mine and got them to run an article about scam companies and interviewing vulnerable and desperate recent grads. Their company logo made the header of the page. I actually personally have some experience with fraud companies. I did an interview in 2019 and I joined a company for a little bit. I won't go into details on what it was, but I always got this very weird feeling about everyone there. Not everyone there, but the people who owned the place, I guess. And as it turned out, when I was discussing it with someone that I worked with, a while later, like a few years later, and we ran into each other, I asked about it and they were like, oh yeah, they were actually using it as a cover to sell the devil's letters and who knows what else. And I was just like, oh my freaking god, I knew that place was off. After that, I was glad I was only there for maybe a month or 2. This was during a mock interview while I was in college. The professor had her husband come in and we had to go in one by one and do an interview just like in real life. Well, everyone is going in and coming out smiling, not taking too long, so I thought it would be a cakewalk. My turn is next. I go in and everything is going smoothly. He takes a look at my resume and sees that I was in the military. He asks, tell me about your time in the military. So I tell him what I did, that I worked with a variety of different people from different backgrounds with different views on life and opinions, and that I supervised people, etc. He says, okay, good, and continues with the interview, asks a few more questions, then says, tell me about your time in the military. I figured maybe he didn't realize he already asked that question, or maybe it was a test, so I repeated what I said. He starts turning slowly in his chair, looking at the ceiling, and says again, tell me about your time in the military. I just looked at him. He stopped spinning in his chair and looked at me. After about 20 seconds, he says, okay, we're done here. I got a B. What secret are you hiding from everyone but okay to share with us here? That I'm leaving my job in a few weeks. I keep having people try and schedule things with me months in advance where I'm sort of forced to smile and agree. It's always weird to be in that space of too early to give notice. I was abused by a neighbor in my adolescence. I didn't tell anybody because I was a boy and embarrassed by it all. The thought of my dad or brothers finding out was too much. Just packed it away. He died when I was away at college. Good riddance. I concur. I found out recently that I have an extra $10,000 in student debt. It's a pretty big secret. I failed high school twice and I'm faking going to college, but instead taking high school final exams. I feel sad and disappointed looking at my parents' faces, but I can't do anything. Instead, just give my best in the exams. My exams are from 2nd of July. Please wish me luck. I really need it. I mean, this was like 5 years ago, so I hope you passed it by now, bud. I am a pathological liar. I don't even mean to do it, but I just do at this point, and it scares me a bit. I am fixing it, though. That's a goddamn lie, and you know it! The family computer didn't break because of downloading music. It was me and my adolescent internet browsing. Oh boy, I've been there, buddy. It seems stupid, but after 3 kids and divorce, I can't figure out my frickin' life, neither where I'm going. I carry around regrets and mom guilt, and I'm completely lost. My wife cheated on me, and we're going through the start of the divorce process. My family doesn't even know. I'm in agony every day. I had some surgery that went very, very wrong, and I am struggling to keep motivated to keep going. I'm a grown man, and I love Winnie the Pooh. I don't own any memorabilia or anything, but I watch YouTube videos, and if I see it on TV, I have to watch it. Hey, buddy, I love Winnie the Pooh too. I don't think there's a single individual on this planet that doesn't, on some level, love Winnie the Pooh, except for maybe the leader of the CCP. I like having crushes, but not actually doing anything about them. Partially because I enjoy the blissful feeling of liking someone, and partially because that gets ruined whenever I actually do anything about it. I regret deeply not bonding more with my college class. I just now realized that I was liked by them and I kind of pushed them away all these years. I want to tell my boyfriend I love him, but I think he needs to get help for his mental health issues before this relationship moves forward. Honey, according to women, that's just about every man in the world. But you do you. I'm afraid of my neighbor. I don't know why, but he just creeps me out. He's always staring at me, occasionally making comments on my
body. Oh, is that you? I thought for sure someone said to model over. You have a great body for a teenager. Those shorts look awfully short on you. I'm 14. He and my dad are friends and is always over at my house. When he comes over, I'll always hide in my room. My mom doesn't like him either because of the time he came during my baby sister's sleepover and just sat in silence at the fire pit while my dad went inside to get drinks. I'm afraid to say anything to my dad because I know he isn't able to get out with his friends a lot and he really likes my neighbor, but I can't shake the feeling that something is just off with him. A few of these have been quite relatable and we're only 3 minutes in. I also dislike my neighbor. And not because he makes inappropriate comments about my body, but that would certainly be a problem. I'm really big on honesty because of growing up with a narcissistic parent. However, I never tell people that I'm bipolar. I'm a PTA mom in the suburbs. The judgment and stigma that would come along with that knowledge would likely affect my entire family. I am physically falling apart. My health is a chain of unfortunate events. I quit smoking, I barely drink, I stay physically fit enough to remain in the military, yet I fight every day just to pretend I am okay. I'm tired of being in physical pain with every little thing, but I will continue the charade until something finally gives permanently. It actually scares me. I hate that I'm 45 years old and feel as if I'm 80. The secret is that everyone I know thinks I'm so strong. I've overcome so much. I'm a fighter. Blah, blah, blah. The reality is I live in daily pain and it's starting to wear on me physically and emotionally. Finally, I just started seeing a therapist. I was afraid to, but I can't handle the anxiety by myself anymore. It's civilian. I simply have lost faith in the military medical system. Not sure how I feel about it yet, but it's not hurting me so far. Glad to hear you're starting to get help. My maternal grandfather was a hitman who killed several politicians and activists in his country during a very corrupt time. He moved to the US and remarried. My paternal grandfather was a corrupt politician who hired hitmen on his political opponents and embezzled right before stepping down from office and avoiding indictment. Not sure if they ever met because this is all I know and found this all out by chance. I don't even think my own parents know this much. That is a pretty insane goddamn coincidence. Like, wow. Recorded my fiance yesterday. I got him to talk about his D&D character and I didn't want to forget anything because I'm going to commission an art piece of it for his birthday. It's killing me to keep it a secret because I tell him everything. I hope he likes it. Whoever this lucky man might be, she's a keeper, my friend. When I was reading that, I was expecting it to go in a different direction. Thank goodness, that was wholesome. I sometimes hope my grandma passes away soon. She has severe dementia and Alzheimer's, and my mom is the only person my grandma will allow to help her, which means she's basically on call 24/7. She's aggressive, a runner, and basically has the mind of a toddler. I feel like a butthole for thinking it, but we've been mourning losing who she used to be. Losing her physically would mean she could be at peace, and my mom could finally take a break. You know, as someone whose grandmother also suffered from memory loss and mental issues towards the end of her life, I understand to a degree. I never got to that point, but it is sad to lose someone on an emotional level in your life that to the point where they don't even remember you. It's sad. It's hard. About 15 years ago, I slept with my high school teacher. Literally never spoke about it out loud to anyone, ever. This is actually the first time I wrote it down even. Guess 15 years is long enough for it to feel like it just doesn't matter anymore. I lost contact with all of my friends months ago. I still try to be happy and smile through everything. I'm a pretty positive person. I think there will come better times, but especially now in summertime when I see everyone on social media are going out swimming or having cookouts, it's kind of sad to be at home all the time or go for a walk by yourself all the time. Why is it so hard to find new friends? Damn. 1 is the loneliest number you can ever do. Whenever I think about that song, I think of Recess the movie. Anyway, I'm sorry you're feeling very lonely, dude. One of my best friend's dad cheated on their wife with a secretary or something and she got pregnant. They kept her baby. That was around the time my friend was born. Fast forward 19 years later on, I meet this guy at work who looks a lot like my friend. When he figures out that I know him, he tells me his story. My friend to this day doesn't know he has a half-brother living in the same city as him, and I can't tell him because the half-brother promised me not to because his dad won't allow it. Pretty screwed up. The father of both told the half-brother to not tell his brother about his existence or he will stop supporting his college education, among other things. Why, you may ask? Because his wife doesn't know about him, and that will definitely destroy their marriage and family, which is selfish as all hell. I cannot say anything either because if I do, I will be the architect of a marriage and family falling apart, or worse, for something which
which is really not any of my business and didn't ask to be a part of. The thing is that the half-brother wants to be the one to go directly to his brother and tell him everything when he's financially capable of supporting himself, and that's something I have to respect. I've known my friend since childhood, and it hurts me not to tell him, but I've been trying to find a way to let him know without being the architect of anything. The 23andMe thing is actually a good idea, and I've taken it into consideration. I appreciate the idea, so I might see if I can come up with something.
Buddy, that right there sounds like a whole lot of none ya. None ya what? None ya business.
And I'm sure that Secret Love Child Man has a plan, a process, he will get it done in due time, but don't push it.
I'm a digital artist who made a bunch of paid commissions already. However, it's all cheated. I used a software for the anatomy and just trace over it. I become that good in line art and coloring, where the obvious tracer red flags don't work anymore. I've never wanted this to come that far, but as soon as I made my first trace drawing, I got sucked into an abyss that is impossible to leave. All my friends know me as the artist. There are many I wouldn't ever have been able to talk to without my art, but most importantly, my parents are proud of my work and call me talented. For the fact that I live in constant fear that my parents are disappointed in me, hearing them compliment my drawings is everything to me. But it hurts so much, seeing them love a work I've no right to present, especially when I try to fit in and complain about tracers while I'm just one of them. This is going on for 3 years by now. Bloody hell, don't trace. Either you get caught or you'll suffer because you weren't brought to your senses.
Not only do I free the raccoons the homeowners association is trying to catch, but I feed them beef tips while I eat frozen dinners. Not sorry. I once saw one of those little freaks rip off a car antenna ornament and run away with glee, and that was hilarious, and now we are homies for life. Well, I can already tell you're an individual that likes to fly pretty close to the sun. Do not play this game, my friend. I have been down this road. You will be tried for treason when they find out your identity. Your family won't be safe. Your loved ones, your friends, they're all dead if they find out you freed those raccoons. Why, oh why would you even risk incurring the wrath of the Homeowners Association of all things? Even though I have a master's degree, I don't know if I'll ever figure out what I want to do with my life. Nothing really pulls me. Well, you know, that sucks, but things could be way worse. You could be a guy without a master's degree and still not have a pull in life whatsoever. That's certainly not the worst situation to be in, and you know, some people don't have a pull in life and also don't have a master's degree. You're in a good situation. You have a qualification. You can do that until you find your passion. Just keep on broadening your horizons, and eventually you'll find it. I hope you do. I touch myself in the bathroom at work sometimes. I would literally never tell that to a soul. HR is long overdue to have a word with you. I wish a couple of my exes would talk to me again, even just as friends. I miss them a lot.
I emotionally abuse myself hardcore. It's to the point now where my life seems to be falling apart because of it. I don't know how to stop either. I can get all the positive things said, but I don't believe it. I doubt every bit of it, telling myself they don't see all the bad because I hide it. The worst part is knowing all this and not believing myself. My dog was put down today in my arms. I don't want my friends to know. I don't want their I'm sorries and condolences. I don't know what I want, but not that. No hugs. I want to mourn in my own way. Other than my family, I want to climb this mountain myself. I want to be able to use the word mate so badly. I can't stand it, but I don't want to seem crazy. I'm an American. I've got a fair few American friends, and I've heard one or two of them say mate in, like, you know, the friendly way, obviously, and yeah, there's something weird about it. Maybe it's their specific accents, but it does weirdly sound wrong. I flushed a Capri Sun juice box into the toilet and blamed it on my little sister. I was 8 at the time, and because of me, we had to open the pipes to remove it. Still haven't told anyone. Everyone thinks my chicken is amazing, but I just buy Popeyes and Churches and mix them together on a plate. Man literally went, but what if I were to purchase fast food and disguise it as my own cooking? Delightfully devilish, Seymour. I was a waiter at a local restaurant. The other night, a man paid his check for the family and tipped me on $158 by giving me $180 in total, in 20s. Now, he had been there for hours and been really annoying, so I had been happy to get anything from him. While I'm counting out the money, the man approached me, says he gave me too much and takes a $20 bill back, giving me a $2 tip. I bit my tongue and walked away. Fast forward, I go to sweep under his table to see his driver's license fell out onto the ground. I casually swept it up and threw it away because screw that guy. He can go waste time at the DMV just like I wasted time serving him. You know what? I might not agree with it, but good for you.
you got your pound of flesh. My girlfriend and I have been dating for 4 years now, and for 4 years we've been dating, I have always found her mother to be very, very attractive. I often fantasize about her. I know I'm weird, can't help it. I recently bought 2 baby goats. My wife doesn't know. I picked them up on Saturday. This is gonna go one of 2 ways. Fingers crossed. I wish you and your goats good luck, sir. I have a corn snake in my no-pet apartment, and 2 of my roommates don't know. Shh. There's a bit of backstory here. I'm adopted and I have a great relationship with my biological family. I was born in Montana and I live in the southern Midwest. I only met my great-grandmother once when she passed. I was asked to come up to Montana because she left me something in her will and testimony. I had to read the will and testimony with my biological father. She left me a 150-acre ranch with a house and a bunker, and it's paid off. I have never told my adoptive family that I own the land and that all of my money goes to preparing all the bunker for super big emergency situations. Inherits land, becomes a doomsday prepper. You know what? It's not a bad use for it. I attempted self-deletion, and then when I lived, barely, I made it my life's work to create a non-profit for stressed-out students in school. Truthfully, it's just my way of fighting the self-deletion thoughts I have. It kills me how disinterested my family and friends are in supporting me. But I continue forward since I do help kids and am proud of what I do. Maybe one day I can afford healthcare and I can fix my own head. It feels so selfish to volunteer and help in the community when I can't afford food and have to beg for help from my parents. I work for the school district and no work in the summer. I just wish there was a way for me to meet others like me. There has to be others out there who lived and are like, now what? Kids love my programs, but unfortunately, I don't have a head for business. It's definitely commendable that you're trying to help others in such a way, but I also think it's important to learn to live within your means and help yourself before you try to help others, because, well, when you're out of luck and out of funds or whatever, then who's gonna help the people that you've been supporting? I really want to call CPS on my niece-in-law. Her 4-year-old daughter is still in diapers, has a vocabulary of under 40 words, and rotted her front teeth down to the gum line, likely because she still drinks from a bottle. This poor child's parents don't give half a damn about her, and it kills me every time I visit. The only reason I don't is because their house belongs to my mother-in-law, and between it being overcrowded, 7 humans, and far too many cats, 9? Someone would have to intervene in response to the CPS call. I just want somebody to hold, bro. Me too, buddy. Me too. I have DID, dissociative identity disorder, and I haven't told anyone for 4+ years. I was going to tell my family last year, but then Split came out and they saw it almost immediately. So if that's not an awkward time to break it to your parents and siblings that you've got the same mental disorder as a fictional murderer in a movie, by the way, Split was relatively inaccurate on certain DID things, just for y'all's education, that they just happened to watch, there's no way I would be believed. I'm going to be killing off my character in D&D and have their body become possessed by a ghost and have that be my new character, but have them pretend to be the original person. It's complicated, but fun as hell for me personally. One day, I walked out to my backyard and saw my dad standing by our compost pile with a couple buckets of dirt and the hose. He was taking a handful of dirt and spraying through them with the hose. I asked him what he was up to. At first, he wouldn't tell me and tried to brush me off. I persisted, and eventually, he told me that early in my mother and his marriage, he had lost his wedding ring when doing work along the side of the house. At the time, he went out and bought an identical ring to the original, and my mom was none the wiser. Apparently, for the last 15 years, when spring comes around and he does any cleaning on that side of the house, he searches through the dirt. My mom still doesn't know he lost the original ring. Personally, I actually think that is so sweet. I burned down my neighbor's house and my family paid them, the neighbors, over $500,000 under the table so that I wouldn't get in trouble, and so that they could buy a new house, a new car, and new furniture, and all that. This was back when I was 7 years old, and I regret it all now. No one else knows this except for my family, my neighbors, and myself. My bathroom is 3 flights down, and let me tell you that sometimes I just don't make it before an accident happens, so I bought a Shiwi and now pee in a bottle if I need to in the middle of the night. The relief is awesome. I'm basically always anxious and furious at the office about how little work I have at my job. I have 10 years experience doing this, so crap doesn't take me very long, even when I spend extra time on something, so it looks like I have more to do than I actually have. It's 100% the company's fault. During the interview, I even said that the position doesn't seem like it'll have a lot of work and asked what the day-to-day is like. They laughed and said I definitely have enough work. But I don't. The most annoying part, aside from trying to look busy all day, is a couple people who are higher than me give me crap about my office hours, despite them screwing around all day, never being at their desk, taking more vacation and sick days than we have allotted, and constantly working from home despite the office weirdly not being too down with that officially. I come in about 20 minutes late every day and leave about 20 minutes early. I eat lunch at my desk like a sad employee because I always want to be around in case someone decides they have something for me to do. I'm at my desk more than these couple of people that give me crap for it. They sometimes say they were looking for me, but I wasn't at my desk. And when I excitedly ask what they wanted and if they had work for me, they say no and then disappear for the next couple hours. They're just giving me crap. I do all the work assigned to me and even do stuff on my own that I feel needs to be done. There is a backlog of work I've completed that no one has implemented. I can't implement it. Some of it is almost a year old. I always ask if people have crap for me to do, and only a couple people ever do. I am constantly worried that I'm going to get fired, despite the company actually needing me and my work. But due to other crappy employees, office politics, and bureaucracy, I have about an hour of work a day, if that. It's also pretty difficult to get jobs at my level in my field, so every day I just have to be anxious and angry, assuming I'm going to get canned before I find a new job. It's definitely infuriating when you're in a work environment that just isn't functioning correctly, especially when you are not the issue at hand. It's just a general thing and other people screwing you over. I was visiting some family on a farm and they have these geese that are super aggressive and always trying to flex on everybody, and one of them came at me a few weeks ago and all I did was clap back and touch one feather just to show it I was serious, and then it turned around and ran into my parked car and just looked super upset and confused. It wasn't hurt and it literally just walked into a car, but it looked so sad that moment and I feel so guilty. I took the cookie from the cookie jar. I am secretly dating my ex-girlfriend's best friend. Neither of us have told anyone because we know how much word tends to get around and she doesn't want to lose her friend. What are people's feelings on that? Is it bad to date your friend's ex wholesale, just outright, or is there a mature and, good way to go about it? Like, if the two or everyone can be mature about the whole thing, I'm curious. I never learned how to put my bra on behind my back like a normal person. I hook it up and put it on like a shirt. There is still hope for you. You can just get a bra that you don't need to hook. What are your unforgettably creepy moments? I saw the aftermath of what happens when a 350-pound man jumps out of a 20-story window. It does not look like what they show on TV. When I was 12 years old, my friends and I were riding our bikes through some woods down an old dirt road that wasn't much used anymore. I decided it would be cool for me to go off-road and rode off into the forest. I got about 50 feet before I got disorientated and started going towards the creek, which was in a dell down a steep hill. From there, something else I didn't know, so I crashed down the hill and hit this huge boulder collection before coming to a rest. Off toward the road, I could hear my friends calling to me, so I knew which way to go. I started over towards their voices and saw a super old rusted out car. Now, I was a huge license plate collector back then, and finding rusted out cars in the woods was not that odd of an occurrence, so I went to see if I could harvest the license plate. When I got there, I saw there were bones in the front seat and a pile of rags. It was full-on Raiders of the Lost Ark with a skeleton on a pike kind of thing. I screamed like a little girl and got the hell out of there. I told my parents later, who called the police, and after some investigation determined that the man had disappeared during a blizzard in the late 50s and was never heard from again. I met his widow and children and won an award from the town. I'll never forget that feeling. Creepy as hell. This occurred in 1981. He had been missing for 20 plus years at that point, and I am now a 43-year-old man. I have no long-term effects from this event. I remember it. I remember being scared at the time and then completely puzzled as to why finding something by accident and then telling my parents about it was such a big deal. I went in the basement and looked in the box where I thought that certificate might have been, but it wasn't there. My mom might have had it. I'll ask my sister if she's seen it. No, I didn't get the license plate. My friends and I went back after all the dust had died down and they had pulled the car out. I've not been back there in decades. The amount of time the body was there is kind of crazy to me, but it's also kind of nice, only kind of nice, that the family must have gotten at least a little bit of closure from knowing exactly what happened to him. More traumatic than creepy, but saw the immediate aftermath of an adolescent run over by the school bus next to the one I was on. It was a cold morning and there was steam coming off the body. I remember that and the spilled lunchbox. This is why they have sweeper bars on the front of the buses now, to make sure adolescents walk far enough in front of the bus that the driver can see them. I have a young daughter now, and these are the things that keep me up at night. Saw a dead guy pulled out of a creek on my parents' property when I was 16. He flipped his truck while high and drunk and trespassing. He decided to leave when the cops were called on him. He didn't make the turn onto the bridge and it flipped his truck into the creek. He broke his neck upon impact. A bunch of guys tried to get him out, but the mud was suctioning him down. When the EMTs and police showed up, they got him out and he was bloated and white by that time. They put him on the rescue sled to pull him up the bank. His bloated white head was bobbing because of his broken neck. That image is burned into my brain. I used to live in a funeral home, literally in a funeral home. My parents owned it, but we didn't have enough income to really support a home for ourselves. So we took part of the building and kind of converted it into an apartment. Due to some pretty bad planning on my parents' part, we had the living room like right next to the area where we kept the bodies, which was right next to the embalming room. Basically, every day I'd see a random naked dead guy or two sitting on a table right outside where I was playing. Sometimes my dad would be working in the embalming room, you know what I mean by working, and since there were pretty big windows on the door, God knows why, I would get to see almost everything, from a guy getting stabbed and having his blood let out, to the egregious stitching that would have to be done to guys coming from the morgue. But as time goes on, you just get used to it, and all of it isn't really that scary. You don't really know any of the people that you see dead, so there's no real psychological impact on you. The only scary thing is when friends of the family get sent to the funeral home. That could put a man in the mental clinic. Growing up in the funeral home, now boys, stop playing with the embalming fluid. When I was learning to drive, my father would accompany me. There was a football game in town that the rest of my family was at, but I was not going for some reason. On my way home and into my neighborhood, a fairly large neighborhood, we went past a van, a plain white van that was off, until it turned on and followed us all the way to the road that my house is on. It went to the cul-de-sac. My father took the truck to the game, leaving no vehicles in the parking area and myself alone at home. That white van decided to pull into my driveway, so I ran into my father's closet and grabbed a shooty bang bang and walked out in my front porch with it drawn at the van. That van went into reverse and backed out of my driveway faster than it came in. It was a very strange experience, and I sat on my porch for a good 30 minutes before going back inside for the night. My neighbor didn't pick up his kids from school one day, so I had to break into his house. I found him on the basement floor with no clothes on. I could tell he was still alive, but obviously there was brain damage as he couldn't form words or even move. I later found out he had a brain aneurysm and he had no clothes on because it happened while he was having some alone time. Man can't even be alone and naked in his house without being worried about a brain aneurysm. God damn. Look, I won't lie, I can be a bit of a hypochondriac. It's like, you feel that pain in your chest off and like, oh God, is it over? I was working in an ice cream shop when I was in high school, and at night, in the winter, it would only be me and another manager. It was in a pretty nice area, and behind the store, there was a giant park that got really creepy at night. That night, the manager was a girl, like myself, not too much older than me, and when we are closing, we have to do trash. We were both pretty small, but we could easily do it by ourselves. I decided to take the trash out that night because she was counting money. So I get all the bags out, and I walk outside, and in the parking lot next to the trash, there is a man standing there. He was wearing sweats, and there was just this look of hatred on his face that I've never seen in anybody before. I ran back in, locked the doors to be safe, and did some dishes thinking that I could do the trash later. I walked into the main room of the store where there are all the windows, and he was standing there in the window just looking in, and I will never forget the smile that came on his face when he saw me again. It was the worst mix of evil and complete joy. I can't even describe how his eyes were. They were filled with
hate. A hate that I've never seen on anybody before. I ran into the back room with my manager, and we hid there for what felt like 2 hours until the police came. By then, he was gone, of course. However, he was arrested a few weeks later for the brutal assault and killing of a girl my stature and hair color. Obviously, I don't know anything about this, and I'm so sorry you went through that. I'm sorry for a lot of the people that go through some of the stuff that they do on this, but that sounds absolutely terrifying. I was just saying the other day how crazy and just downright petty some of the motives that people have for doing certain heinous and brutal things to other people are. I was flying to India, and we had just stopped in Germany. I was 14 and sitting next to this old guy who I thought was asleep the whole time. I shake him because we landed, because he was kind of laying on me. No response. I was an unaccompanied minor, so when the stewardess came to get me, she looked at him, checked his pulse, and then everyone was ordered to stay where they were, including me. The paramedics came and declared him dead. I never knew for how long. I had never seen a dead guy up close before and was surprised at the time. I thought he would smell of something rotten when he died or would make a noise or something beforehand. To this day, I always think if I had noticed earlier, I could have helped him. I also had a dead guy lay on my shoulder for 8 hours, and I fell asleep during that flight as well, so there was a good chance I used his head as a pillow while I slept. Creepy, but that's life. Once when I was like 10 years old, my dad was unemployed and we were struggling for a few months financially, and some kid in school called me a broke bum over something I don't even remember, and he told me to buy some decent clothes and that I looked like a hobo. It wasn't that bad, he was just saying stuff to hurt me. That really struck a nerve, so after school I walked up to him while he was sitting on his bike, and I punched him so hard on the one side of his head that blood started coming out of his nose and his left eye turned red. He screamed, "Oh my God, I can't see!" I just felt sick to my stomach and felt like a monster. I just wanted to disappear that moment. But he was fine after a few minutes. It's good that you felt bad. Is it an excuse? No, but you felt bad, and that's a good thing because it means that you have empathy. But you know what? On the other hand, that kid probably never grew up to talk so much unnecessary smack ever again. I say unnecessary. You said to yourself, you don't know why you were arguing. You might have been the one at fault. You, sir, are an unreliable narrator. But that's okay, I am too. You seen these comments out here? They're killing me. When I was young, one of my friends was killed just outside of school in the woods. A week or so later, my friends and I were walking through them, like dumb little idiots. And we found the knife still covered in blood. One of the guys picked it up and took it back to the school. Luckily, it was a simple case and the guy was already arrested, or we could have messed up the evidence for the case. But needless to say, that was what put it in my mind that the murder had actually happened and that I needed to be more careful. When I was younger, I used to have really intense visual hallucinations. Some normal stuff, glowing orbs, floating hands, that kind of thing. But the creepiest thing that I ever saw was my own dead body on the floor in front of me, wearing the exact same clothes I was wearing at the time. You know, I literally just heard this the other day, but apparently if you drink more than 6 cups of green tea a day or something, you can start having hallucinations, apparently. I don't know if that's true, and I do not endorse anyone testing it out or whatever, because why the hell would you want to drink 6 or more cups of green tea anyway? This might not be the caliber of the other stories here, but this freaked me out when I first saw it. So like 4 years ago when I was in high school, I used to exercise in the basement of my house, which is connected to the garage because my house is built into the side of a hill. Anyway, I'm exercising when I hear this loud clicking noise coming from the garage. I had no idea what it was. It was like 10 p.m. and everyone else was either asleep or in their bedroom on the other side of the house. I opened the door to the garage and I can't even comprehend what I was looking at. A bat had gotten its wing stuck to some fly tape and the clicking was its teeth against its bone. It was trying to bite off its arm. The clicking was so loud. I'm picturing it, the imagery, the darkness. It sounds creepy as hell. Hell, I remember one time I walked into my kitchen, got this weird colored LED light thing in it, and I turn it on, pitch black room turns to pure red, scared the crap out of me. But this is way creepier. The bat, the imagery, the darkness, the lateness, it's all perfect. It's way scarier than my thing. Back in college, a junkie broke a window to get into my apartment, stole some stuff, a camera, some of my roommate's girlfriend's jewelry, whatever. Called the police, boarded up the window, and started to go to bed. Until my roommate pulled back his covers and found a blood-soaked rag hidden under his sheets. The guy had cut himself on the window and hidden the rag. Still no idea why he bothered. I want to say it was his attempt at hiding DNA evidence, but obviously it was a very bad attempt. When I was 13, me and my friends were hanging around town like usual. We
We went to the park first in the morning. We saw a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was wearing a hood and he had a long beard. He had a can of beer and got up and started walking toward us, so we ran. Later on, we were taking a shortcut through the library's car park to go to McDonald's, and we saw the same guy standing by some bushes staring directly at us. Two of my friends, girls, started dancing for some reason. They hadn't seen him. It was only me that saw him. I told my best friend Walter, and we tried to get everyone else to hurry up. Walter turned around to check everyone and saw the guy in the bushes now. His fly was undone, and his dangly bits were hanging out. We ran as fast as we could, and we didn't see him any more times after that. I should certainly hope not. So this was pretty weird for me. My mom used to take me and my brother to the beach every summer for a week. Well, one year we're walking along the beach and we get pretty far. I was probably around 8 or 10 years old, so it felt pretty far to me, for whatever that's worth, to where the beach got kind of desolate. There we saw something lying in the sand. My mom just said it was a sea slug or some kind of worm from the ocean, and I bought it. Well, a few years later, I have the distinct memory of having a sudden Clarence moment and thinking to myself, that was no worm, that was a man's dangly bits. Yes, someone had cut off a man's dangly bits and it somehow ended up on a beach on the East Coast. A likely story, but it might also be something that is known as a geoduck, which does very much look like a one-eyed wiggly worm. Bus ride on vacation in Greece, windy mountain road, suddenly a load of bees, then really lots of bees, then all the bees. Rounded a corner to see a truck on its side, broken beehives all over the place. As our driver sped up to get away from the bees, I'm pretty sure I saw a flash of the driver of the crash truck falling to the ground, covered from head to toe in bees. Always assumed he was not getting up from that. Death by bees is not a way I would like to go, nor is it something I would like to witness. I was on an international flight, and upon landing, the flight attendant was unable to wake the lady in the seat directly behind me. They called the paramedic upon landing, but it was obvious that she was dead. I heard them say, "She's dead." And they made us all get off the plane so they could remove the body. Perhaps not creepy, but more of a did that really just happen type of moment for me. Also, when I was 16, I saw a guy get capped. It was on Thanksgiving, and that's about all I remember about it. In comparing the two plane stories that we have where people died on them, I can't help but think, how is it on one side you had people be like, "It's okay, young man, just stay there while this corpse is on top of you," and the other one where, reasonably, "Okay, everyone just get off the plane while we get the paramedics in here." It's just different mindsets, I guess, or company process? Either way, I prefer one to the other. Not really nearly as creepy as most of these stories, but a few years ago, I was kayaking in western North Carolina. Beautiful day, pretty calm river, but the water was low and rocks were out in force. I kept having to push them off. At one point, I was coming up to a medium-sized brownish rock and preemptively tried to push off it and moved it. Thinking, that's weird, I continued to push it, only to turn around and realize that it was a dead dog. The face looked kind of mutilated, and now that I'd dislodged it from whatever kept it in place, it rode the white water and followed me down for a while. The worst part was that I kept finding them. 4 dead dogs, all seemingly killed violently, floating down the river with me, bumping against my kayak. That legitimately sounds like the worst kayaking trip ever. My friend and I had permission to go over to this abandoned house to basically loot what's left of the house and keep what we picked out. The house was empty except for junk and empty pill bottles and medication. The garage, however, was filled by the mounds of crap the previous tenants had left over. As we're rummaging through the crap and books, I find a bag filled with gun parts and triggers, lower receiver, barrel and firing pins, and a banana mag, and another gun that was just missing the stock and firing pins. Gold mine. I quickly pocket that crap in my backpack and continue searching after finding this amazing loot, and I continue up into the attic. I find a small journal and a bunch of meds and needles and a bunch of government files and folders with red tape all over. The documents had redacted black lines and stuff, so all I could make out was that they had an operation initiated for deploying weapons or something. So after that, I read the journal. The journal belonged to the wife of the man who lived there. At first, it started off very dark. Stuff like he would start coming home late at night without announcing himself and would mutter and get angry. Later, he was being treated with meds for which I don't know and don't remember what meds was left in the attic, and apparently was a paranoid schizophrenic.
schizophrenic and was extremely abusive and would hurt the wife and not remember doing that a few seconds afterwards. She spiraled into depression and talked about self-deletion and stuff. Then one of her friends took her to church and it seems to make her feel better. The last time she saw him alive was when she went to get his meds refilled and later came home to find him dead by self-deletion. He had a lot of firearms and the police confiscated most of the guns. Shocked after reading it, I found another diary or book written by the husband and it was filled with poems about his wife, life, death, etc. His poems were nice, but I always keep wondering what really happened to the guy. I don't have the diary anymore, nor a photographic memory or evidence. You'll just have to take my word for it. Well, that just made me sad. I left my pillow in the car at a hotel parking lot outside of Atlanta as a kid. I, of course, went back to go get it at night, turned a corner only to be met with a hobo touching himself. Scarred me for life. I haven't had anything too creepy happen to me, but my dad has seen a lot of stuff. He used to be an accident investigator, vehicle accidents, in Iran. He's had 2 accidents that have burned into the back of his skull. The first was a bus that had some sort of metal pole, sorry for the lack of a better word, go through the front and skewer passengers. He explained how when they opened the bus door, there was blood spilling down the steps. The other was when he was at the police station, where he worked. Before I start, let me say that it was a tradition to turn your truck's light off when you pass a police station. At this station, they had a sign saying not to because it caused a lot of car accidents. So what happened was that there was this 18-wheeler driving down and he decided to turn his lights off. At the same time, on the other side of the street, there were 3 young guys, ages somewhere from 18 to 21, in a car that would resemble a Mini Cooper. They had the stereo on full blast and pretty much having a good time. As the young guys were driving, they didn't see the 18-wheeler coming their way. I guess what happened was they didn't see it and pretty much drove on the wrong side of the road. You can guess what happened. I remember my dad saying how the music on the small car stereo went completely silent right when they crashed. The 3 guys died on impact. Worst part? The truck driver came in with his food pretty much saying, "Hey, where can I go eat?" Emotionless and not caring that he just killed 3 people. My dad and the other guys working there, they were friends, took the guy into a room and beat the crap out of him. I was a 13-year-old kid sliding down the side of a gravel pit in an old quarry. The pit was located close to a private graveyard dating to the 17th and 18th centuries. On what would be my last slide down the side of the pit, a skull rolled down after me, landing with a dry rattle against the small of my back. I ran home and told my mother. I was panicking. Ultimately, the police were called. A high school teacher of mine, a man with an anthropology degree, was called in when it apparently became quite obvious that this was nothing recent. It turns out that the skull belonged to a person who had died of tuberculosis, as was not uncommon during colonial times, of being a possible victim of a vampire attack. They had been buried outside of the graveyard, face down. At some point after they had been buried for a number of years, they were dug up and some of their bones were rearranged. The rattle I heard from the skull was due to the individual's canines having been removed, and they were found inside the skull. I had no idea about people from the 17th or 18th century being like, oh, tuberculosis, no, vampire attack, and stuff like that. But there's also something really entertaining to me. It's so like, TV show-esque, I guess. Obviously, fiction imitates reality, but like the whole call the teacher from the high school with the anthropology degree, I don't know, that's just fun to me. Parents of uncool children, when did you realize your child wasn't one of the popular kids? My oldest son has always been quiet and a bit of an introvert. He's tall for his age, lanky, wears glasses, plays trombone in the school band, and is a complete computer geek. There were never any delusions that he was going to be one of the popular kids. That said, he is popular amongst his fellow nerdlings. My youngest son has always been pretty popular, especially among the girls. We have had little girls calling the house, giggling and asking to speak to him since he was in 4th grade. He's in middle school now, and I fear what it will be like when he gets into high school. My son got locked in his tuba case by the other band kids. He's not even cool among the not cool kids. I know my daughter is uncool. Why? I have no idea. She's a great kid, very outgoing and funny in that 3rd grade kind of way. She gets picked on a bit for the things she likes. Hello Kitty, Barbie, MLP, etc.
As a kid, I was super unpopular too, and I tell her all the time not to worry about it. She'll find that group of friends who love her to death and want to play with her. She came home very excited last month because a new girl in school had the same Hello Kitty backpack. They made fast friends, and I hope they stay friends. Her single dad is pretty cute and uber dorky like me. This topic could turn dark at any moment, so enjoy the wholesomeness while you can, viewers. My daughter has always been quick to make friends. She always has someone to play with at the park. Kids follow her around like she's their leader, and she has a blast. In school, though, she's not popular. She's the oldest in her class because her birthday is so late in the year, so she's taller than everyone, started losing her teeth before the others, and more mature than some of them. The other kids pick on her, call her names, hide her things, make fun of her bunny teeth, adult teeth that are still at that cute but a little too big for your face stage, and give her a hard time. I don't understand it. She's so popular at playgrounds and parks, but she's an outcast at school. Ah, the days of adolescent playground bullying. Been there, sister, been there. My oldest is a crybaby. I love him a bit, but he's a whiner of the highest order. I guess I realized it about when he left kindergarten. He's in 5th grade now, and he still curls up in a ball with real tears whenever he thinks he might be in trouble, even if he isn't, which he almost always isn't. I love him. But it's sad. When they reminded me of myself, my middle child loves video games and is amazing in academics and has mild autistic tendencies. My eldest loves bugs and animals and gets distracted easily. Neither one of them is prom king or queen material. The youngest is a born cheerleader. Why do I have all of those not good tendencies? I also love bugs. I also like video games, but I'm not good at academics. When he cried all the time in 1st through 3rd grade, then in 5th grade he insisted he was going to be a dragon hunter. That continued for a few years. He actually researched getting grants so he could travel to Europe to dig up dragon bones and prove they existed. Then he got into drawing swords and writing stories involving the swords. It's all good. I accepted him as he is and got him playing Magic and D&D. Now he watches anime all the time and is working with people to develop and write an online RPG and site while doing online schooling and working 2 part-time jobs. I figured he'd never give me a grandchild, but she's due in July. The best thing a child can do is surprise and make proud a good parent who's always supported them. I don't know if she's uncool yet because she's too little, but I witnessed a situation that brought up a lot of feelings. My 4-year-old daughter went to a birthday party of some little girl from her kindergarten. They had these mini blow-up jumping castles. I noticed 2 little girls standing at the entrance of one that blocked it when my daughter tried to get in and made up some rule about why she couldn't. I did laugh my butt off when my daughter immediately thought, screw it, and just ran around and back to the other entrance, but the girls got up and went to the other one when my daughter hopped in, leaving her in there alone. I got really depressed just watching her play by herself and the other girls being mean. Part of me wanted to deflate the other castle, sealing the little girls in a rubbery tomb. The other wanted to run over and just hug my daughter and never let go. Needless to say, I bought her a lot of lollies and played with her like crazy after the party. But then, a few days later when I dropped her off at kindergarten, some of the girls called out to her and ran over and started playing. I can't figure out toddler social dynamics. There is a 10-year difference between me and my youngest brother, and I first noticed that he was just not a cool person when I picked him up from school and found out that he has a tendency to hiss like a cat at people when they said something he didn't like. God, I love the little weirdo. I'm an older sister by 8 years, and I noticed my middle school sister wasn't popular simply on the basis she got bullied so much that she had to hide in the library during lunch, and she takes an odd route home to avoid the kids who actually corner her on the way home. She's the extremely shy type, and the butthole kids don't really help that. They stole her lunch and spit in it once apparently, and she came home depressed one day because of it. Sometime around middle school, it became apparent that regardless of who she tried to be friends with or how much effort she put into being social, she was always the odd one out, always the friend and never the best friend. No one calls her to hang out or go anywhere. She doesn't date. I still haven't figured out why, unless it is basic, not wanting to be seen with someone who might be a lesbian. This is the southern US after all. It's killing her. It's killing me to see how isolated and left out she is. She's nearly done with high school, and I can only hope that college will be better.
For now, she has an online group she considers friends. There's that, at least.
I can't deny that when I was young, it took me a lot of time to learn how to socialize a lot better with people in person, but until that point, I had a lot of online friends and interactions that really did help keep me going. It does make me sad to think that without the interconnectivity of the internet, some people would just be completely alone, and that thought honestly breaks my heart, and it's why I try to be as nice as possible to people where and when I can. My son, who is almost 15, has several learning disabilities, ADD, dyspraxia, and mild Asperger's. He finds it very difficult to make friends and keep them. He also struggles with low self-esteem. I've tried to get him into all sorts of different hobbies, but he's not interested. The only thing he loves is video games, to the point that he could easily play them for 15 hours a day. He also has a very offbeat humor, which most people don't get. I love him to bits because he's my son and his heart is in the right place, but I do worry about how he's going to get through life and form healthy friendships and relationships. Man, parents have so much to worry about when they have kids and stuff, and it totally makes sense. But even when I was a kid in high school, I was going through a point where I thought, man, I'm never gonna make friends. But I was lucky enough to meet people that appreciated and loved me and just generally helped me become the person I am today. And hell, I ain't no success story, but I certainly like who I am, at least on the best of days. But that's one of the hardest things in life, growing up and learning to love yourself. I had 6 children, 5 girls and a boy. Some were popular and some weren't. My unpopular, kind of reserved and socially awkward during primary school son is in med school and will be a doctor next year. I don't think popularity is necessarily a good criteria for judging how your child is doing. In some classes, the kind of behavior that allows you to fit into a class and be popular are not all that positive, such as bullying more vulnerable children. I think the most important thing is for children to be true to themselves and who they are, and not compromise that to fit in. Hopefully they will find friends who are like them. I thought it was interesting that the creators of South Park were nerdy kids who didn't fit in. Sometimes the most successful school children are not all that successful when it comes to real life, and the children who are strong enough to be themselves can be quite successful. That is certainly true in some cases, but sometimes not. This isn't really what this is about, but I'm glad that they brought it up. My youngest son is a future neckbeard. He's a great kid and very active in Boy Scouts. He's 14 and only needs a few things to get his eagle. He can easily achieve it before 16. He's good in math and science and very well spoken when something interests him. He can explain plants and trees and geology of an area to younger Scouts on a level far above the average 14-year-old. But outside of Scouts, he is very socially awkward. He has a hard time making friends. Unless they are Scouts or gamers, he's overweight but not morbidly obese, and I guess average looks. I wish more of my wife's genes had kicked in. At home, it's all Xbox and computers. He has no interest in the outside world. If I ask, hey, let's go walk the dog down by the river, I just get, no, I don't feel like it. If I'm working in the yard on a hot day and my wife says, why don't you go and see if your dad could use some help? His reply is usually, if he needs me, he'll come get me. He's had his few middle school girlfriends that we all know are counted in weeks, but when they break up, he's devastated and becomes recluse for a while. His room is generally clean, but it smells of feet and butt. He won't shower or change clothes unless we tell him to. We actually held off to see how long he would do it. He wore the same t-shirt for 5 days over summer break. I didn't ask about underwear and socks. We just explained it and told him to go shower and change. A lot of these stories are really old and I'm just sat here like, man, I want to know how these people turned out. Like, did they surprise them? Yes? No? I hope so. I realized when we moved to a community with its own playground. My daughter is 5. She's so loving and sweet and very intelligent, but she's not good at making friends. She has no problem asking anyone to play, but most of the kids immediately shut her down and walk away. I have no clue why. Sometimes they'll give her some bullcrap line about her having to stay in the ice castle, which is one corner of the playground. She asks if she can come out, but they tell her no, and then they go off by themselves. So she sits there, dejected and defeated. She's such a genuinely good child and a good person, and I don't know why the other kids treat her like they do. I remember the same thing happening to me when I was her age. Kids can be so cruel. I knew before kindergarten that our son was not cool. He's an artsy, strange, nerdy kid that is bad at sports. He couldn't catch a ball when all the other boys could. He's also brilliant, has near perfect pitch, can tell a joke better than anyone his age, and is particularly empathetic. He always consoles whoever is having a bad day. One of the aspects that clued me into his wonderful nerdiness is that he'd construct a pretend world with all sorts of characters and scenarios, and could not understand why the other kids, excepting a few like-minded lovable oddballs, did not want to participate. He's picked on. It is amazing how cruel 5-year-old children can be. He's the target of the alpha male types. Until 2nd grade, he did not realize that he was uncool, but then it hit him. He's now 10 and in 4th grade. His teachers tell us that he is well liked, but he does not have any friends, which my wife sees as a problem, but I don't. He asked me once when he was 7 why other kids didn't like him. I pointed out that a lot of people like him, just that the cool kids didn't want to include him in their clique, and that's okay. I let him know that neither his mother or I were ever cool, and we've done okay for ourselves in this world. Aside from being a total geek for old school Mega Man, my 11-year-old is crazy proper and very white in an almost all-black school. He gets called Whitey constantly, and kids from the bus have beat the crap out of him and his little brother on more than a few occasions. He will now choke anyone that puts him on the defensive, which comes off a little bit like a serial killer in training, but to the proper thing, I once got a call from the principal because my son had set up a meeting with him, stating that he needed to switch schools because these kids all have behavioral issues and I can't get an education in this environment. No snark or anything like that. He was completely on point and very upset that the teacher didn't have her classroom under control. There was an HR director hiding in my kid's body. A little off, but damn, do I like my boy. I am a much older sister, which is sort of similar in a lot of ways. I realized my brother wasn't one of the popular kids when I went to visit his school to show off the high school band program. The cute-looking, well-spoken kids tend to sit together, and so do the less cute, dorky kids. I always sort of guessed, though, because he'd always been that weird gamer kid with beta tendencies, and hardly ever got invited to birthday parties. It was just confirmed when I went to visit him. Damn, girl, slapping your brother with the beta tendencies. Cruel, cruel woman, even if it is true. My son is 10. I think I realized he's not part of the popular crowd last year. He had a sort of falling out with his best and only friend. After they stopped hanging out, I'd ask him who he played with at recess or who he sat with at lunch, and he'd tell me he played alone and sat at the end of the lunch table alone by the trash can. It broke my heart. He's such a sweet kid. Pretty sensitive, quiet, but not super shy. More of an observer. He's not the first to jump into an activity, but give him time and he'll participate. His interests have always been different than those of the popular crowd. We tried various sports, a season of soccer and a basketball camp, only to come out of those with a lesson on teamwork and how it's not fair to the rest of the team to quit halfway through the season. He's had ambitions to be a paleontologist since 2nd grade. He can remember facts about dinosaurs that he's read 2 years ago. He's incredibly intelligent. He's also a huge Star Wars fan. His favorite is The Empire Strikes Back. We put him in Cub Scouts so he can socialize with kids who aren't into sports, but by the time he joined, most of the boys in the troop already knew each other. I try to dress him in what the kids are wearing, Hollisters, Aero, etc. He has no preference for what he wears, and if I can take away one thing that kids always single other kids out for, then I'll do it. Overall, I think he'll be okay. He's got 2 to 3 friends with similar interests. He's a smart kid. If he can get through middle school and high school, I think he'll do just fine. I wonder if he's studying dinosaur bones as we speak. My parents moved and my little sister had to start high school in a new town, and I was worried she wouldn't make many friends. I was excited when she joined a small group and started hanging out with them until she wore a fake tail to school one day. Oh dear. Spits out cereal in the morning. Oh my god, my sister's a furry! My high school age daughter wanted to drive into the city to watch a Wes Anderson film and eat at her favorite vegetarian Indian place for her birthday. We live in the rural South. You ignorant fool. What was cool 10 years ago and what was cool now have completely switched. Your daughter wasn't unpopular, she was a damn trendsetter. At my daughter's first parent-teacher conference in 1st grade, I asked the teacher how my daughter was doing socially. I had noticed that there was a little talk from her about friends, unlike kindergarten, and the teacher paused uncomfortably and said something about my daughter being very bright, and sometimes bright kids don't have patience for things they find silly, which sets them apart a little, but that I shouldn't worry. My daughter will graduate high school this year, and she only has a couple of close friends, one of which she's had since 3rd grade, and even those she doesn't really see or hang out with often. My son took longer to be obvious to me because his elementary
elementary school teacher flat lied to me and told me that he was socially doing just fine and had quite a few friends. My son does normally have a small circle of friends that he's comfortable with, but he's never been and will never be one of the popular kids. Neither one of my kids are bullied. My daughter was in elementary school, but not since, and I attribute a lot of that to the way our school handles the bright kids. Starting in 7th grade, the high achievers and gifted kids, my daughter is a high achiever, my son gifted, are separated out into Honors Academy. For 7th and 8th grade, they only have classes with each other, and they do a lot of forced group work and social interaction in addition to the regular curriculum. Because they're so separate from the rest of the school, there's a little chance for them to be targeted, and they form friendships with their fellow weirdos. I had a lot of doubts when they first introduced this program. My daughter's 7th grade class was the inaugural year, but it definitely seems to have resulted in happier kids. Neither of my kids have a ton of friends or in the neighborhood of popular, but they have a niche at school and feel safe and able to be themselves, which is great. Of course, their district also instituted a character program about 5 years ago, which also seems to have had some impact on how the kids interact. With all the talk of the gifted kids curriculum, I'm thinking about Malcolm in the Middle a little bit. God, that and My Name is Earl are absolute TV gold. If you haven't seen them, definitely check them out. I've known since I met him for the first time. He's my stepson, so we first met when he was 5, and he was just the biggest little whiny brat you could ever meet. He's now almost 9 and still a bit of a little crybaby, but less so. He's had no friends at school because he's an obsessive Star Wars geek. Husband and I take blame for this. We're both huge fans, but he was named to surpass us and hit the freaky stage. It is all he talks about, and it tends to alienate the other kids. But I think what truly does it is when he acts like a Lego person. All day, every day, as long as we're not running errands, he walks like they do on Lego cartoons and holds his hands in a C shape to mimic their hands. Talks like Yoda fairly often as well. He's the kid having a great time by himself, playing all the different roles in his game. I think all this makes me love him more. He's a little awkward genius, and I wouldn't want him any other way. Oh, and I don't worry about him picking up chicks later in life because he already has a girlfriend. He tells me he hasn't gotten a new one because the girls in his new class just aren't pretty to him. Apparently, he's got some high standards. I can't deny it. I'm picturing it. I'm picturing that little boy doing his Yoda voice and doing the Lego walk, and I'm just thinking, trouble in Lego City there is. I secretly hope my daughter doesn't turn out cool. I want her to have some good, trustworthy, and responsible friends, and I want her to be a kid who likes to read, do art, exercise, and chill with dad playing video games. I have a vague idea why people do it, but there's a specific reason I read that one. So basically, the whole thing was like, because you're a cool kid immediately means you're kind of a piece of crap. That is not the case. People are not arbitrary two-dimensional things. You can be cool and be nice. You can be uncool and a total douchebag. Hell, I'm pretty sure most of the time there are like several opinions on who is actually the cool kids at school, because schools are big, especially high schools. I remember turning around to my friend and being like, wait, you think they're the cool kids? I thought they were the cool kids. But I meant it more in like, no, they're cool. They are actually cool and nice and everyone likes them. But I concur, being a dad and having your child play video games with you, it's a nice thought. My daughter was in developmentally delayed classes for 2 years of pre-K, then had a special helper for kindergarten with speech every day. We moved, and in first grade she was different and could not make friends. She was received from speech, and remedial reading put her on Adderall for ADHD without hyperactivity, and she makes A's and B's but still different. Her storytelling was a little weird. I've always been well-liked but an introvert. She's an extrovert and was not well-liked. I started giving her social tips. Ask what they want to do. Let them do the talking. Ask about what they like. People like to talk about themselves. Now she has a ton of friends. So weird that it worked. I think I've always known but never cared. Popularity means nothing later in life. My only concern is that they find a few friends to hang out with at school. Man's got his priorities straight. It's not about gaining popularity or anything like that. It's having friends, true friends, and, kindling joy and all that stuff. Best thing you can do for your kids at the end of the day is make sure they're happy, safe,
and you love them. I mean, damn, with all the anxieties that parents must have with raising kids, it's no wonder that you screw up in a couple of places. But, like I said, just gotta make sure that you're doing your best. People who have been on reality TV shows, what's rigged and what's not? My friend was on What Not to Wear, and I was in the audience of people who were there to react when she came out from behind the curtain with her new look. She came out over and over again, but our cheering was never enthusiastic enough for the producers. After about 10 takes, we were screaming our heads off, totally hysterical, as if we'd just seen her rise from the dead. So that part was fake. I thought she just looked alright. Sob stories on singing shows. It's not the contestant's fault. I made it through a few rounds for a well-known singing show, and they begged you for a sob story. On my very first application form, I was asked about the most difficult moment in my life, what obstacles I'd overcome to be there, had I ever experienced bullying, etc. They pretty much make you tell them a sob story, so I wrote all about my heartbreak when I ran out of coffee. I have always thought there are far too many sob stories on those shows. My aunt and uncle were on Love It or List It. They had them record both endings, and the network chose which one they thought was best. They're still in the house, and they love it, but the show says they listed it. Already I don't know half of these shows, and I'm actually really excited to find out about obscure or weird reality game shows or something that I just don't know about. My cousin was on a Toronto dating show called Matchmaker many years ago. She said it was completely scripted, and she met her blind date before filming so the producers could go over the script with them. They were given a list of ridiculous and racy questions to ask each other and encouraged to make out if they actually liked each other or to cause a scene and be dramatic if they didn't really click. I mean, when you're thinking about all kinds of reality television that there are, dating shows are most definitely the most likely to be fake because, you know, if it's blind dating especially, like things can go wrong there. Really bad things can go wrong there. So it makes sense that they'd be like, hey, this is all fake. This is actually the guy that you're going to be meeting and stuff. My daughter and her boyfriend were on divorce court. They were not married, and the show's producers helped them tailor their story, which was completely made up. To be more interesting, they are now married, and since they've already been divorced, it should last forever. Some of my friends went on Cash Cab. One guy was chosen the day before and told to come with up to 4 friends to a certain spot the next afternoon. They met a producer who hailed the cab and were told they were going to a game show. They had to reshoot getting into the cab because my one friend said something like, "What are the chances we're on our way to another game show?" I have worked on several reality TV shows. Some are more fake than others, but they are all heavily scheduled and formatted, never spontaneous. I worked on a certain MTV dating show where one of the contestants tried to escape the house in the middle of the night, and one of the production assistants had to tackle him in the front yard and drag him back into the house. It's like prison. They are completely cut out from the outside world. No computer, books, phones, watches, and they are fed mostly booze. They all go insane. Also, if the show doesn't air, they don't win their prize money. This is a standard for all competition reality shows. I think I remember there being an episode of Big Brother or something, you know, back when it was like a new thing, I'm pretty sure, and they all had to like sit in a box or something for like the entire day, or it was like the last person out of the box wins the challenge, which, yeah, that does sound pretty ridiculous and just maddening. I have a friend who signed up to audition for a show that she thought was The Bachelorette, or something similar. I guess it's standard practice to not give the actual name of the show and just say, "We need good-looking, energetic young women for blah, blah, blah." So she got called back, went through a few different interviews and a screen test. Finally, they tell her that the concept is that she will be running a pawn shop with another woman. She is a dental assistant with no experience remotely related to the pawn business. Pawn Queens ended up being on for 2 seasons, and they gave her a backstory about how/why she got interested in the pawn business. Not exactly shocking, but it was pretty interesting to see that they basically looked for hot girls first, then put them into a proven concept, Pawn Stars type reality show. A friend of mine was on Shark Tank recently. The episode hasn't aired yet, so we don't know how they will edit the story to be, but they did get an actual deal with actual money from Mr. Wonderful. My father is a dealer in a particular variety of memorabilia and also fairly well known as an authenticator of said memorabilia. He was on a show featuring storage units a few years ago. The show crew peppered a storage unit with some of my father's own collectibles. The hosts found them, then brought them back to my father to be appraised. He then offered to purchase his own items back from the hosts. was on an episode of MTV Made. It wasn't super scripted, but certain things were added to make the kids look stupid. On our episode, the producers had socks stuffed inside a kid's drum to make them sound bad, even though the kid didn't actually do that. Stuff like that. But the script had room for ad-libs, and the show was fine with that as long as nobody said anything too crazy or suggested anything they couldn't deliver on. Unfortunately, a lot of the kids on the show go back to how they were before almost immediately after filming. People can totally be who they want to be, but why apply to the show? And also, it kinda sucks when the show drops a butt ton of money on you. Our episode involved paying for an appearance from Finger 11 when they were huge, and it ends up being a waste for everything other than getting a TV episode out of it. I was on a show geared towards preteens and teenagers that tried to imitate Fear Factor on YTV. They had us compete in various unique athletic competitions and other things. Most of it was surprisingly real. We actually did compete. Our scores were based on our performance in the task. The one thing that wasn't real was that the episode made it look like everything happened in a day, when in reality, it took about 5 days to film. Overall, it was a really cool experience that I wouldn't trade for the world. Hey, we got a nice one. A friend of mine worked as an art director on the American version of Super Nanny. She said pretty much everything was real, maybe editing together to make it a bit more dramatic, but the family interactions were genuine, and she said Jo Frost is a very sweet, warm woman who really does her best for the kids. I'm not sure if I prefer Super Nanny to be fake or not, because some of the children could be vile, and some of the parents, if I remember correctly, were kind of not very receptive to their children's needs either in some cases. Every single thing is fake. I was on a cake competition show. The judges recorded 2 takes for every comment, 1 positive and 1 negative, so the editors could put it together however they wanted. They rolled the clock back an hour so everyone else could finish. We had over 3 months to plan our spontaneous cake. Oh yeah, and while we won by the judges' vote, a producer decided one of the other cakes would film better for the big reveal, so we didn't win, even though we should have. I was on Restaurants Impossible a couple years ago. They say they have a $10,000 budget for the renovation. Definitely does not mean they use it. The host, Robert Irvine, was only there for like an hour a day of the 3-ish day venture, just to get in the way and whine about things for the camera. They made up this whole story about how my boss would lose everything and cause so much stress on his marriage and family if the restaurant failed. They had us walk this direction with a sullen look to show that we felt underappreciated as employees. We had 4 employees actually walk out because of some of the comments Robert made. We also did not get paid any extra for any of this. But while all of that was annoying, I will say this. The Food Network did pay almost $4,000 for a very local construction crew to come in, which is awesome for local business and support. The food was very awesome, and I got to learn some insane techniques from the world-class chefs at the very start of my career. I am a chef myself now. It was a very neat, exciting thing for a small town and definitely brought our community together, and while the business did still end up failing a year and a half later, my boss was totally fine because he bought out another restaurant and is now a very successful person elsewhere. Kinda sucks that they feel they need to play up the drama aspect of it, but I think it's good that they at least are there to actually do some good in that case, which, a little bit of good, little bit of bad makes it more interesting. I was on an episode of Extreme Guide to Parenting. My mom is a hypnotherapist for a living, and so they interviewed my brothers and me about getting hypnotized to do chores and get good grades. They had us say things like, my mom using neuro-linguistic programming to make us do things, and that she hypnotizes us on a daily basis. I was 14 and I had to pretend that I had a crush on this boy, and my mom taught me how to hypnotize him to like me. All the parts with me in it were cut out, thank God, but my twin brothers got a decent amount of airtime. All of it was scripted. It was basically a publicity stunt on my mom's part to get more business, and I don't blame her. It worked pretty effectively, and we got a $5,000 check for letting them use our house to film. To clarify, everything my mom said was true to a degree, and she has hypnotized me in the past. But hypnotherapy is not what everyone thinks it is. It is a way of gaining more self-control, not less, and in no way is it someone controlling your mind. There are subtle cues you can give people to get them to agree with you, such as nodding your head when you ask for something and touching their shoulder, but other than that, it it is mostly used to help people stop smoking or biting their nails and even improving concentration and avoiding panic attacks. Just like another therapist might help you, my mom does it with hypnosis. As for exploiting my brothers and me, it was really fun and I laughed a lot when I saw the final cut. I thought my family didn't seem so bad when compared to others that I saw in the same episode, but I can't judge. Either way, the whole plot was made up, but it is true that my mom taught us how to exit something called fight or flight mode when in non-life-threatening situations, like when you panic. She taught us to think clearly. Nothing as extreme as how they portrayed us in the show. Honestly, it's counterintuitive to make a show that puts my mom in a bad light for business reasons, and so while everything was scripted, she did maintain her usual air of professionalism. The directors just took all the parts that made her look as bad as possible. I'm genuinely enjoying this one because not only do I get a bit of insight as to what is actually fake in these TV shows, the entertainment factor, but also the utility factor, like with the Ultimate Chef Experience or whatever it was a couple stories ago. Diners, drive-ins, and dives. Kinda real. Maybe. 50-50. Friend owns a butcher shop and happens to be the supplier of meats to this restaurant where an episode of DDD was going to be filmed, and asked me to come along with him. We were part of the crowd scene where guys come around and ask other people things like, so how's the burger, etc. Thing is, not one of the people in the restaurant during that scene was a random restaurant customer. Everyone was a special invited guest of the restaurant owners. Once we arrived, the producer dude placed us in seats and they made a few people move tables and booths for a better overall crowd look, I presume. They gave us some preliminary instructions: make sure phones are off, don't ask for guys' autographs at all, don't pay attention to camera, etc. And then we waited and waited and waited. After maybe 45 minutes or so, the waitstaff just started bringing out food and placing it on tables. No one had ordered anything, but the staff just started bringing stuff out. Once a decent number of people had dishes at their table, the servers would continue bringing food out. But this time with camera peeps behind them filming them as they took plates to tables. They did some interview shots with people eating, and when I watched the episode, it was edited to look as if they were responding to something the guy had said to them, even though he wasn't around at all at this point. Shortly after that, Guy Fieri comes in and everyone applauds, and he just sort of waves his hand at everyone quickly, never smiles, and goes back to typing on his phone. Now, I had always thought Guy Fieri looked kinda douchey, but was probably a nice person. No absolute total diva douchebag the entire time, never acknowledged the crowd, barely acknowledged the production crew, just kinda seemed like a douche. Literally was standing right beside a booth where someone was sitting, and the lady sitting there said something to him like, hey, we love your show. Guy Fieri just kinda does this half smirk and smile thing and never acknowledges the lady or anyone at her booth. Only, and I mean only, when the video guy would say, action, would he try to turn on the charm and actually talk to crowds of people. Get excited and talk about the food and stuff. Later, after he filmed the restaurant scenes, they backed his Camaro out of a trailer and filmed all of the scenes where he's driving around. The crowd scenes were done at this point. My buddy and I were just hanging out and chatting with the owner and one of his managers. The restaurant kitchen scenes where they were going to film Guy and the chef prepping and making the food were filmed the day before, and the owner said it was the exact same thing. Zero interaction with Guy Fieri until the cameras were rolling. They even filmed some outtakes, which were somewhat pre-planned and set up in advance. Once the car scenes were all done, Guy Fieri heads back into the RV and we didn't see him again. The crew came around and did some other shots and interviewed some of the other staff and such. Overall, it was an interesting day. I have admittedly never had much of an opinion of Guy Fieri. Not surprising, ghost hunting shows are fake. What is surprising is how they do it. See those fancy instruments they carry that no one has ever heard of? They're actually remotes to each other. All you gotta do is split into two groups, and when one team is adjusting their settings, the other team is detecting ghosts. So simple, and you get twice the footage. Also, one time in a screening when the hunters were reviewing evidence, a producer whispered to me, see that ghost shape behind the door? Yeah, that's the sound guy. Wow. Now that's actually interesting me and sounds kind of fun and makes ghost hunting shows, I don't know, kind of more entertaining. If anything, that's just a good idea to be like, yeah, we're gonna prank each other or something. Had a friend who worked on the Kardashians. They were filming a huge party. It was dead. No one doing anything. The producers asked if anyone had any ideas. Friends mentioned beer pong. Producers made him act like a guest and teach the mom to play to make the party look fun. Everything was fake. I heard from a tattoo artist that he had auditioned to be on Ink Master and met Kay Cutter, season 2, and he explained that to be a part of the show, they look for personality traits and flanderize the hell out of you to make a character that can create drama to the show. Kay Cutter did actually have a criminal record, so they used that to make him the bully of that season. The tattoo artist who I was talking with claimed Kay is actually a really cool and nice guy. I have never watched an episode of Ink Masters, and this is the first I'm hearing of a Kay cutter. I worked on the Sing-Off and ABDC for several seasons in the contestant department. The performances and the performers were all real and really cool. I listened to the Street Corner rehearse Creep on stage one day and got goosebumps from how good they were. There are decisions made by producers to increase the market value of the show, like keeping a fourth group until the final round because they didn't want to lose a key demographic from the audience. The finale was always live and based on fan vote online, so that part was real. One season of ABDC, a contestant broke his leg. That was also sadly real as I was there to witness call 911, the producers, and my manager. They were concerned about getting B-roll of him going into the ambulance. He was a really sweet kid. But these shows are exceptions in the industry, not the rule, and both have been cancelled. Went to a filming of American Ninja Warrior. They filmed all night with over 100 competitors, running the course back-to-back for around 7 hours. The only ones cheering like on the show were family members on sidelines. Everyone else was kind of quietly observing. It was impossible to figure out who would make the show and who ended up on the cutting room floor. After watching the actual show on air, even completing the course didn't guarantee that your run would be shown. Several got over the break, so-and-so made it to the end of the course, cue 2-second cut of button press. The best bet to making it on air, outside of their stable of famous ninjas, was to fail on the course in a way that nobody else had. That very last bit about failing in a way that nobody else has yet, it just feels too true in not only people, but also just life. My brother-in-law surprised our family a few years back by taking us out to dinner, and at that dinner he announced that he was taking an internship in Peru. Turns out he was on a major US reality show and had signed an NDA and couldn't tell us where he was really going. He ended up being a semi-finalist, going all the way to the finale. He said the parts that they make especially dramatic, the parts where contestants stand in front of the judges and explain themselves and then ultimately one is sent off of the show, could take hours to film, and that each of them would have their reaction filmed a handful of times with the producers standing right there on set acting as directors and coaches. He also said that the contestants were constantly supplied with booze of their choice and were encouraged to drink. He said people were under the influence of alcohol very frequently, but that it would never be evident as the cameraman would keep the drinks out of the shots. As far as the rigging of the results went, he said he was fairly certain that the producers were having the final say, but that the judges were included in the decision-making process. A friend of mine was on Cupcake Wars. His team actually came first. He said that the ingredients were partially random. The studio sent his team a list of 5 or so different ingredients that were potentials, and then 3 different themes. He had a plan for every single ingredient and theme if needed. Britain's Got Talent. There are several hidden rounds with producers before you get to the main stage with the judges. My cousin is a very talented musician and got to the last round before the auditions, but they said he didn't have the right image. They select the most watchable acts and usually try and avoid any act that's too professional in case they bow out and get a recording contract outside of the show's format. This is just concerning musicians at least, so not fake as such, but slanted. I know someone who went on Britain's Got Talent once, and I will simply say that they made a bit of a butt of themselves, but it was also kind of a mixture of their own decision making and the way that the scene was shot and edited. Undercover Boss is a joke. Everyone knows the show, everyone knows what's going on, everyone knows who the owner of the store is, and for those who don't, are a simple Google search away from knowing. I briefly appeared in an episode of Airport 24/7 Miami. My appearance was basically me doing my job the same way I would do without cameras rolling. The same was true of the stars of the show, since it wasn't like a traditional reality show where they needed to create a conflict. The airport does that organically. They got really lucky that some particularly noticeable events happened while they were filming, like when the fuel farm caught fire and exploded, or when 2 aircrafts collided on the taxiway. Everything they showed on the show actually happened, but editing did make some events seem more dramatic. Oh, is it bad that this subject is actually making me want to work on reality TV shows behind the scenes so I can laugh at the fact that a show is trying to manufacture conflict and whatnot? It just sounds so silly. Like something from a holy book where God, played by MTV, bursts into your life. And like this Miami one was interesting because there's a day-to-day conflict going on there, but the MTV people just go, okay, you hate this guy, that guy hates that guy, you love
love this guy and you hate that guy because she loves this guy. That kind of thing. And the thing is, I scarcely ever watch shows like this, but being on the inside, being behind the scenes and creating this stuff can be a harrowing but entertaining process. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I was on Love Island last year. It's a popular TV reality show in the UK. This year's is actually on at the moment. I guess people assume some is staged and rigged, but you have no idea how much. We were literally given scripts of arguments to have, things to say. You know when you see them having sex under the covers? Not happening. We would have to imitate this 5 to 10 times each, and the producers would choose the most realistic one. There is whole parts of the villa that you don't even see. Multiple camera rooms. Ever wondered how the islanders never clean, but it always gets cleaned? There is literally cleaners, waiters, etc. in the whole time. Only about 6 hours a day and night are filmed. There is a director there saying cut and everything. You know the £50,000 grand prize for the winner doesn't compare to the $75,000 we got for being in the villa. Regardless if we were there for 6 days or 6 weeks, when we got out, we had meetings and I had over 600 brands queuing up to work with me. Now I'm a nobody, and you wouldn't even recognize my name. Relationships aren't real. There is an agreement that is 100% for the show. Things are never how they seem. Also, we are shown the episodes every day. There is no will be cool to see what I look like on TV when I get out. There is also outside contact. That is just bullcrap. My jaw literally dropped on my 4th day when they showed us the show live on TV because of how different it was to reality. What was something you saw you were definitely not supposed to see? My severance check. Apparently someone at the payroll company addressed it to me instead of HR, opened it at my desk and laughed. Packed up my crap and left. I found a letter between my parents back when my dad was in the army 10 years before I was born, when cleaning out the house. He was saying how they should get a divorce because it just wasn't seeming to work out. When I was 16, they did end up getting a divorce. And I have never spoken to them about it. Leaving work late one evening, I saw the HR director and CFO in a dark office shredding papers. No, that's not a euphemism. I didn't say anything, but quietly walked on down the hall. 2 weeks later, we were raided by the SEC and several people were charged with cooking the books. Sounds like some Wolf of Wall Street stuff going on there. Back in 1997, I started work at a new job and took over the office of a salesman who had recently been fired. I was in IT using the same computer that had been set up for sales. My first task was to install all the software I'd need. The computer hard drive was almost full, so I poked around and found a ton of folders filled with smut. Went to my supervisor and he said to delete it, warning me that the salesman had been fired for downloading smut. Over the next few weeks, I kept finding secret smut folders on the company's network. Not only had he downloaded enough smut to max out his computer's HD, he had the network at about 90% capacity. When I was done deleting all of the folders I could find, the server capacity was less than 50%. Dude was seriously addicted to his smut. I wouldn't have just fired him. I would have booked therapy appointments on his behalf. Worked for a downtown metropolitan hotel for a long time, and I've seen a lot of stuff I wasn't supposed to see. Probably the worst was a kid with an old man. Checked this guy in at 1 a.m, not uncommon because people travel at different times, but he was alone. Like an hour later, he asked for something like a towel or blanket. Anyways, we dispatched our runner to deliver it. After the runner comes to me and says he thinks something is wrong because he caught a glimpse of someone and the old guy was trying hard to block the entrance. Being that we were supposed to take stuff like human trafficking seriously, I asked our maintenance guy to cut his power so we could get a call to come up and try to fix the problem. He does, and I go up with him to apologize for the inconvenience because the guy was a member. Sure enough, we hear a kid in the bathroom hiding. Try to ask who the kid was, and the old guy tried everything to shut us down, from throwing his status around to bribing. We called the cops and we let them deal with it. Just 2 days ago at a community pool, a teenage couple who entered into the pool area went into the hot tub, stood up to stretch my legs and looked over to, well, SX in the hot tub. It was midday. I cringed pretty hard, but I laughed even harder when the neighborhood cop showed up. I once arrived early to pick up a girl for a first date. She was renting a small garden apartment behind a bigger house. It was just after dusk and I walked around the corner. The sliding door was standing open, and she was inside walking around, brushing her hair, wearing only her underwear. She did not see me, so I just walked back around that corner and waited another 10 minutes. When I walked around again, she had a dress on. I never told her. The date went well, and I only got to see her underwear again several weeks later.
When I was about 16, snooping in my parents' wardrobe, I found a diary written by my mother when she was 14 from the year 1970. Read some beautiful and brilliantly written entries about meeting and dating my dad, who was 16 at the time. Had to read a little between the lines in some slightly later entries as they were written with such flowery language. In one such entry, all of a sudden, she discloses that she's had an abortion, performed by one of my relatives, an anesthesiologist, and she has never told anyone. This is the reason that you don't poke around in people's diaries, because you might find something that you never wanted to know. I was in elementary school playing basketball. I shot the ball, but it ended up going over the fence onto the other side of what was someone's backyard. My teacher requested that after school I knock on the door of the house where the ball had landed to get it back, and so I did. I did not expect a woman wrapped in a towel with one of her nipples revealed to answer the door. I was shocked, but carried on with my mission. For those wondering, she stated she did not have the ball. Back when I was a teenager, we hosted a New Zealander at our house for a couple weeks. Guy gets to our place after the flight, and about 10 minutes later, I'm walking around my house to see where he's at. The door to his room is partially open, and the dude is laying face down on the bed and humping the ever-loving hell out of a pillow. I backed away slowly, like Homer when he saw a poo cheating on his wife. I felt bad for the pillow. My mom gave me an old laptop of hers when I was about 13, and I was scrolling through random pics she had left on it of my little brother's football game, and then boom, nudes. Years ago, a colleague had an old smartphone that he brought in to give to another coworker as theirs broke. The phone was sitting on the new owner's desk, but she hadn't yet tried it out. As it was still charging after months of not being used, we were talking about how cool it was of the coworker. Smartphones were not widespread yet, and I picked it up to see how it felt in my hand. I pressed a button, and the first thing that I saw was a Google search for lump on anus. I quickly put the phone back down. This must have been the last thing he searched for when he last used it a long time ago, and forgot about it. When I was 11, I walked into my mom's bedroom and saw my mom and her husband doing everyone's favorite number, and we never spoke about it. Years later, when I was 24, she walked into my bedroom and saw my boyfriend naked. We never spoke about that either. All probably for the best. My dad's Alcoholics Anonymous chips. Learned it's why my parents got divorced. Proud of him for being in recovery, though. When I was a young teen, I was once leaving my house to go do something in the neighborhood. As soon as I go out of the door, I heard my parents at the garage. My mother seemed to be in her car, and my father was sitting down behind her car and pleading with her not to leave. My parents were divorcing, and I saw a few scenes that I wish I never had. Not really horrific, but seeing your parents in emotional pain can be rough. No doubt, no doubt. The code to open all the doors in my primary school at the time. A lot of power to open any locked door for an 8-year-old. I don't know about anyone else, but I remember being a kid and being like, looking at the chain link fence in my primary school and going, I could climb that, I could escape, wanting to escape, thinking about escaping, but then I'd always chicken out and be like, oh God, but what would the consequences be? Am I going to get in trouble with the teachers? What would my mom do to me if I ran away from school for a day? Like, 8 to 10-year-old me, what are they going to do? I'd go straight home. And what would happen then? My mom would probably walk me all the way back to school, and it would just be a massive waste of time. I do conventions and corporate events for a living. Was once called into a room to fix a power cable. It was a meeting of a worldwide, well-known house paint manufacturer. It was a closed-door meeting, and I had to be let in to do my job quickly. They didn't stop talking as I did my work. We've pulled all the units from production and recalled all units on the shelves, but the ones still in transit cannot be recalled. They might be caught when they reach the sales floor if the retailers are still watching the recall, but it will have been weeks since we issued it. The guy who then responds to that states that they can prove they did their diligence in court with the recall, and any units sold to consumers will be the retailer's fault. I never did get to hear what the recall was for, but they seemed pretty tense about it, legally speaking. So I doubt it was quality control. I felt like I had witnessed the mafia talking about a murder. The owner of the club where my sister worked took an armload of shotguns out of his truck. It was about 3 a.m. and I was parked behind the bar waiting for her. The reason I know he didn't mean anyone to see is because he covered them with a tarp and he gave a good long stare around when he got out. Shady dude. He was up to every kind of no good. I literally scrunched down in my seat. I accidentally found someone's notice of performance improvement plan on our company open access SharePoint site. Went straight to my manager so they could quietly inform the manager of the person and have it removed. The person on the performance plan quickly became a top performer and closed the second biggest deal in the region. Not long after, their manager was replaced. Maybe they were always good. Maybe they saw the improvement report and thought, damn, I need to get my affairs in order. And they did it. In spades. I used to work in the basement of a pretty large hospital doing engineering work. They'll often cart dead bodies out of the hospital through the basement, so it's usually not a big deal. You tend to try and ignore it. One time, as I was finishing up a test in a pretty remote room, I walked out to an entire security detail escorting a body. I just got immediately shoved back into the room, so nothing really exciting happened, but I always wondered who that could have been. My third job I had at 17 was at a pizza place. I had 2 managers, one male, one female, and they were both married to other people. Well, I went to hand in my drawer at the end of the one shift and walked into the office, and there they were just making out with some heavy petting. Their spouses found out. They left their families, and then those 2 managers got married to each other. As far as I know, they're still together. Also, no, I didn't tell their families. I was 17. I didn't even know these people's spouses. Their families found out because they told them themselves because they both wanted divorces from their respective spouses. I tend to have a way of finding things out that I'm not supposed to due to my inquisitive nature, but one that comes to mind was when I left my last job. My general manager wasn't exactly a warm, woolly person and was not pleased that I was leaving. I had to get something out of the manager's office and saw my name in an email on the desk. She had told the other 2 managers to wish me the best of luck in my future career and that I would be missed. I was shocked because she actually took the time to send that out to them. Never heard that from any of them, but seeing it showed that she actually cared. Whenever I meet or hear someone say, I am an inquisitive person, I have an inquisitive nature, I just think, you're bloody nosy, which is hypocritical because I'm nosy too. On my way to work in the morning one day, and I'm on a train leaning up against a glass partition between 2 seats. The lady on the other side was doing the same thing, and as her mobile kept pinging with incoming messages, my attention was drawn to it, and because of the angle, I could see the text exchange. To summarize, she offered services of the scatological nature, and the person on the other end was complimenting her on how her mess didn't stink, and I'm going to leave it at that. Definitely not something I should have seen. What everyone made in my company salary-wise, CEO and all high ranks included. It was a very detailed Excel file meant for the owners of the company. For every tier you went up, that salary pretty much doubled. I was 12. I was trying to make my BMX bike into a long-forked chopper-style bike. There was an old man down the road that welded as a business. I had dropped my bike off for some welding on my forks. Went back several days later to pick up my bike. Walked into his shop just as another man pulled an enormous bag of the devil's lettuce out of a duffel bag. They both stopped and just stood there, staring at me for a moment. I turned around and noped the hell out of there. The men then proceeded to look at each other, say, well, that was kind of awkward. See you in a month or something? I suppose depending on the year and place that this occurred, it would be more or less worrisome if someone saw you do a handoff with a big bag of the devil's lettuce. Back in high school, my friends and I used to skateboard in a church parking lot. One day we're hanging out and this car comes tearing into the parking lot and drives over to a secluded corner. A lady gets out and goes to her trunk and pulls out a gun. We think she's about to delete herself, but then she notices us standing there. She paces back and forth a few times before getting back in the car and leaving. As soon as she left, we went across the street to a convenience store and called the police. I think this might be the first story where someone was like, I witnessed a crime, and then actually went on to call the police instead of burying it in the back of their mind and, posting it on the internet. It might not be the kind of answer you're looking for. A teenage boy's hands, skin, and muscle essentially degloved. I was visiting my folks when the kids came up to the front door, knocked several times, and then promptly collapsed. He'd been riding a go-kart at full speed when the chain broke, wrapping itself around his wrist. The kid survived, but totally lost his hand, amputated. I was a little kid and I went looking for something in the house. Opened a closet in the basement that I usually never looked into and found a huge stack of Christmas presents. Walked over to them and saw they were all from Santa. What the actual heck? Why would Santa deliver presents 2 weeks early, and why would he leave them in the basement closet? Oh. I used to work on oil rigs, and one stormy night I had to go to the cellar deck, the lowest level of the rig, to do a repair, and I caught the safety officer and the production supervisor opening a separator valve and emptying the contents, oily water, straight into the sea. They obviously chose a wintry, stormy night to do this so that by morning the oil would be elsewhere. My wife and I vacationed to London a couple of years ago. After dinner, we decided to go out to try some of the local pubs because, London. We didn't want to go to the tourist trap places, so we followed around some locals. It was about 11 p.m. when we got to the last pub. It was a nice-looking place with a younger crowd. I really had to pee, but I couldn't find a restroom anywhere. I walked up to the guy working
working the front door and asked him where the restroom was. He looked at me kind of funny and said, "Upstairs, first door on your left." I thanked him and scurried back into the bar. The staircase was in the back left corner, blocked by a table. I found it odd. I had to ask the group sitting at the table to move to let me slide by. They thought it was strange too by the looks on their faces. You could tell that these stairs weren't meant to be used, but I had been drinking and my bladder was about to bust. As I reached the next floor, there's a long hallway with about 5 doors. The bouncer had told me it was the first door on the left, so I tried it. Nope, it was a dark room with empty kegs. Pretty normal, maybe he meant the right door. Nope, dark room with extra supplies. I started to wonder if I was too drunk to follow directions, but then I noticed I could see a light under the door at the end of the hallway. That must be the bathroom. Or so I thought. I opened the door to find a group of people in very sharp business attire seated around an oval table. They were clearly having a meeting of some sort with their laptops out. They were incredibly surprised to see me. They all froze in place and we all looked at each other for a good 15 to 30 seconds. Finally, one of the guys says, "What the hell are you doing here, mate?" I replied, "I'm just looking for the bathroom. The door guy told me it was up here." They all looked a little confused, but the guy responded, "We don't have a restroom in this building. Now please leave." I apologized and closed the door, then headed back down the staircase, confused as hell. The good news was that my urge to pee went away. I slid past the group at the table and returned to my wife, who had ordered some fish and chips, and told her all about what happened. We both agreed it was strange, but ordered another round and thought nothing of it. About 5 minutes later, I noticed the guy in the very nice looking suit come down the stairway. He saw me, then went to the security guy at the front and said something to him, then pointed at me. I almost pooped myself. The bouncer walks up to me and says, "You guys have to leave." I told him that I had not yet paid my tab, and he said not to worry about it, just go ahead and leave. I obliged. My wife and I stand outside the bar while we wait for our Uber to take us back to our hotel. The bouncer is sitting there just staring at us. It was a very awkward 5-minute wait. When our Uber gets there, the bouncer says in a very Jamaican accent, "You'll have a very good night," followed by a very loud laugh. To this day, one of the weirdest events of my life. Why were they having a business meeting at 11 p.m. in a pub on a Saturday night? Why did the bouncer tell me to go upstairs when he knew there was no bathroom? Why did they kick us out afterwards? Why did the bouncer creepily laugh at us? We have no idea what happened, but we love to tell this story and see what everyone else's theories are. I can only assume English gangsters, or maybe, I don't know, shareholders in the property meeting for whatever reason. Like, that's a thing, I think. And I mean, sod it, why not? You own a pub, why not just meet at 11 o'clock at night, drink to your heart's content while getting some goddamn work done? I was living in San Marcos, Texas in early 2003. My boyfriend at the time and I were heading home from a party around 2 or 3 a.m. when we get stopped at a train crossing and a super long train is going by. I mean, we sat there for a solid 15 minutes watching this train go by. Some of the cars had slats or cage walls, so you could see what was in the cars when they were backlit by the streetlights. We could clearly make out a large amount of military equipment was being moved down to the coast, or maybe an airfield. Within a month or so, it was publicly announced that the US was invading Iraq. Shared the house with my parents. Got a letter from ISP for illegal downloading. It was smut that involved multiple people. Had to tell my 70-year-old father that I knew and where he could find the free stuff online. A conversation I'm sure many of us never wish to have. Back in 2012-ish, I ran a food truck in Chicago. Chicago apparently let the Restaurant Association practically write the food truck ordinance. The ordinance stated that trucks could only be parked for a total of 2 hours at a time. We needed more time than that to make the sales we needed to be profitable. My boss had a few restaurants and the Restaurant Association wanted him as a member, so we got to sit in on a meeting and make our case about the parking time. During this meeting, they were having a discussion about how to kill the new minimum wage laws that were being discussed. It was like I was seeing the elite discuss how to keep the common people down, and it made me so incredibly angry. Doing retail PC repair, I found a massive folder of CP on a customer's laptop. Called the cops, state police, and FBI were there within 30 minutes. He ended up getting like 20 years. I was in a church in France once and it was pretty empty, very run down and had bullet holes in the walls, presumably from World War II. Anyways, on the right-hand side of the church, there was a wooden floorboard covered up by carpets. Curiosity got the better of my brother and he lifted it to find a passageway down to a tomb with skeletons and coffins without lids on them. I recently looked at the photos we took and it was truly creepy.
My 65-year-old mother getting out of her wheelchair and walking around like it was nothing. She'd been wheelchair-bound for 5 years at this point. I'd had my suspicions, but had talked myself out of them because that was ridiculous. Who would pretend to be wheelchair-bound just for the attention? Sadly, when you are around long enough, you find that people are willing to do lots of things simply for attention. While looking for my birth certificate, I found a death certificate for a brother I never knew I had. This made me curious. I looked a little further and found family photos from my mom's previous marriage I was never told about, as well as her divorce records. She had a whole other family before ours and never told us, but I'll never bring it up to her because it's really none of my business. I opened the deep freezer and saw a severed German shepherd's head. I worked at a university animal research hospital. I knew better than to look in there. Worst fear confirmed. Also saw a window into the digestive system of a cow, and a dead horse lifted by forklift into a truck for disposal. I do kind of wish I could unsee all of that. It sounds like an unpleasant and kind of gruesome job, but it also sounds like an interesting one. Grew up with separated parents, and my mother worked her butt off to provide us with a lifestyle we definitely didn't deserve. 60+ hours every week, while my siblings and I fought constantly, verbally and physically. One Christmas, we wanted a really expensive toy. Well, we went on a scavenger hunt to find it, and we did. As soon as we told her, she broke down in tears. I'll never forget the pure regret I felt in that moment. I felt like an absolute douchebag, and still do. One day, I'm going to provide for my mother with everything she deserves and more, and make sure she never has to lift a finger once she retires.
Amen to that, brother. I also lived in a single household my whole life, and my mother is an absolute angel who has provided me with the best care that she can, and she deserves the world. The cream will rise to the top.
Hope you enjoyed that bootleg Randy Savage. Rest in peace, Macho Man.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.